Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. For 11 years, I've been hauling cargo along the Pacific coast. At 23, I left college because I couldn't succeed there. Then, while searching for a job where I could think without having to talk to too many people, I started. Big trucks suited me. Solitude suited me. The rhythm of the highway, the white lines disappearing under my hood, the sound of the engine. All of it added a meaning that classrooms and office jobs never did. Most drivers have their preferred routes. Some love the I-5 corridor through the Central Valley, a flat, predictable road where you can see for miles. Others prefer mountain passes, the challenge of inclines and curves. Me, I've always been drawn to Highway 101, that road hugging the coastline from Eureka to San Luis Obispo. There's something about driving with the Pacific on one side and the coastal mountains on the other that soothes my soul. The pay is decent if you're efficient. I work for a mid-sized outfit called Pacific North Logistics, hauling everything from lumber to seafood to electronics. We're not the biggest company, but we're reliable, and that counts for something in this business. My rig is a 2019 Kenworth W900, dark blue with chrome accents. I've put close to 500,000 miles on her, and she runs like a dream. I named her Marion, after my grandmother. Only person I ever really trusted. It was late October when this run started. I'd picked up a load of canned goods and dry groceries in Crescent City, bound for a distribution center in Morro Bay. Nothing unusual about the cargo. Nothing unusual about the road. I'd made this exact run probably 50 times before. The dispatcher, a guy named Miller who'd been with the company longer than I had, gave me the paperwork and told me to take my time. Weather was supposed to be clear, but you never really know on the coast. Fog can roll in without warning, especially this time of year. I left the depot around 4 in the afternoon. The sun was already starting its descent toward the horizon, that particular slant of autumn light that makes everything look gold and temporary. I pulled onto 101 southbound and settled into the familiar rhythm of the road. My CB was quiet. Most drivers don't use them much anymore, preferring their phones, but I keep mine on out of habit. Sometimes you pick up useful information about traffic or road conditions. Sometimes you just hear the lonely voice of another driver pushing through the night. The first hour was easy. The road wound through dense stands of redwoods, the late afternoon sun breaking through the canopy in shafts of dusty light. I passed through a few small towns, places with populations under 1,000, where the main street is also the highway, and there's usually one gas station, one diner, and a post office that's only open 3 days a week. I didn't stop. I had a good 12 hours ahead of me, and I wanted to make Morro Bay by dawn if I could manage it. Around 6, the sun finally dropped below the horizon. The sky went through its progression of colors, orange to pink to purple to that deep blue that isn't quite night yet. I turned on my headlights and kept driving. Traffic was light. I passed a few cars, got passed by a couple of others. A southbound semi going the opposite direction flashed his lights at me in greeting, and I flashed back. Small gestures of recognition between people doing the same job, covering the same endless miles. By 7:30, it was fully dark. The ocean was invisible now, just a vast emptiness to my right where the land dropped away. I could hear it, though, when I cracked my window. That constant rush and pull of waves against rock. The air that came in was cold and tasted like salt. I closed the window and turned up the heat a notch. That's when I noticed the fog. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a thin mist hovering over the road, caught in my headlights like gauze. I'd driven through fog 1,000 times before. It's a part of the job on the coast. You slow down, you keep your eyes on the white line at the edge of the road, you watch for taillights ahead of you. You don't panic, you just adjust. But this fog was different somehow. It had a thickness to it, a quality I couldn't quite name. It seemed to absorb my headlights rather than reflect them. Within 10 minutes, visibility dropped to maybe 30 feet. I slowed from 65 to 50, then to 45. The white line at the edge of the pavement became my guide. The only constant in a world that had suddenly contracted to just the small circle of road illuminated in front of me. The CB crackled with static, then cleared. A voice came through, distant and distorted. "Anyone southbound on 101 near Shelter Cove, you're gonna want to watch yourself. Fog's thick as soup down here." I picked up the receiver. "Copy that. I'm about 20 miles north of you, already in it." "Yeah, it came in fast," the voice said. I pulled over at the turnout near Needle Rock. Gonna wait it out. I considered doing the same. There were plenty of turnouts and rest areas along this stretch. But something made me keep going. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the fact that I'd driven through worse fog before and come out fine. Maybe it was just the rhythm I'd already fallen into, the steady forward motion that felt safer than stopping. "All right, stay safe out there," I said into the CB. "You too, driver." The static returned, then faded to silence. I drove on. The fog grew thicker. 50 feet became 40, then 30, then 20. I slowed to 35 miles per hour, then 30. My high beams were useless, just bouncing the light back at me. So I switched to low beams. That helped a little. The white line kept me anchored, kept me moving forward in a straight line, even when I couldn't see anything else. Time started to feel strange. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 8:47 p.m. I looked at the odometer, trying to calculate how far I'd come, but the numbers swam in front of my eyes. I rubbed my face, blinked hard. I wasn't tired. I'd had coffee before leaving and felt alert, but there was something disorienting about the fog, the way it erased everything beyond my immediate surroundings. That's when I saw the first sign. It appeared suddenly in my headlights, a green reflective rectangle on the right side of the road. I couldn't read it at first, the fog obscuring the letters. I slowed even more, creeping forward until the words resolved. Ocean Viewpoint, 2 miles. I knew this sign. I'd passed it dozens of times. It marked a scenic overlook where tourists pulled off to take pictures of the coastline. There was a small parking area, some interpretive signs about the local ecosystem, and a guardrail preventing people from walking too close to the cliff edge. Nothing remarkable about it. Just a landmark I used to gauge my progress. 2 miles later, I passed the overlook itself. I could barely see it through the fog, just the dark shapes of the guardrail and a single light pole casting a weak yellow glow. The parking area was empty. No cars, no people, just fog and darkness, and the sound of the ocean somewhere below. I kept driving. 5 minutes passed, maybe 10. It was hard to judge time in the fog. Everything had a sameness to it, each moment bleeding into the next. The white line, the pavement, the wall of gray pressing in from all sides. Then I saw another sign. Ocean Viewpoint, 2 miles. I frowned. That didn't make sense. I'd just passed the overlook. Had I misread the first sign? Had it said something else? I slowed down, squinting at the sign as I crept past it. No, it definitely said Ocean Viewpoint, 2 miles ahead. A small knot formed in my stomach. I checked my GPS. The screen showed me as a blue dot on Highway 101, moving steadily south. According to the GPS, I was about 8 miles past the Ocean Viewpoint overlook. But the sign said otherwise. I rubbed my eyes again. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Maybe the fog was playing tricks on me. I decided to pay closer attention when I reached the overlook to make sure I actually saw it this time. 2 miles later, there it was. The same guardrail, the same light pole with its weak yellow glow, the same empty parking area, everything identical to what I'd seen before. I pulled into the parking area and stopped. The engine idled, a low rumble that was comforting in its familiarity. I put the rig in park and sat there for a moment, trying to make sense of what was happening. The GPS still showed me 8 miles past this location, but I was clearly here, in the parking area surrounded by fog. I could see the interpretive signs near the guardrail, their text obscured by moisture and poor lighting. I could hear the ocean, louder now, the waves crashing against rocks somewhere below. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket and stepped out of the cab. The cold hit me immediately, seeping through my jacket. The fog was so thick I could barely see the front of my truck. I walked toward the guardrail, my boots crunching on gravel. The flashlight beam cut through the fog in a weak cone, showing me a few feet at a time. I reached the guardrail and stopped. Beyond it, there was nothing. Just fog and darkness and the sound of water. I couldn't see the ocean, couldn't see the rocks, couldn't see anything. It was like standing at the edge of the world. Something moved in my peripheral vision. I swung the flashlight toward it, but there was nothing there. Just fog. But I could have sworn I saw something, a shape or a shadow, darker than the surrounding gray. I stood very still, listening. Over the sound of the waves, I thought I heard something else. Footsteps, maybe. Or something dragging across gravel. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded flat and strange, absorbed by the fog. No response. I waited another minute, then walked back to my truck. I climbed into the cab and locked the doors, which I almost never do. Something about this place felt wrong. I couldn't explain it. Couldn't put my finger on exactly what was bothering me, but every instinct I had was telling me to leave. I put Marion in gear and pulled back onto the highway. The fog seemed even thicker now. I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. I crept along at 20 miles per hour, following the white line, watching for any other vehicles. There were none. The road was completely empty. My CB crackled. I picked up the receiver, expecting to hear the voice from earlier, the driver who'd pulled over near Needle Rock. Instead, there was just static. I tried adjusting the squelch, but the static persisted, rising and falling in waves that almost sounded like breathing. I turned the CB off. The silence that followed was worse. Just the sound of my engine and tires on pavement and my own breathing. I turned on the radio, scanning through stations. Most were nothing but static. Finally, I found one playing music, some late-night jazz program. The saxophone was a comfort, proof that there was still a world beyond this fog, beyond this isolated stretch of highway. I checked the clock, 9:23 p.m. I checked it again a moment later, 9:23 p.m. The second hand was moving, but the minute hand seemed frozen. I tapped the clock face with my finger. It was working fine. I must have just checked it too quickly, not given it time to change. I forced myself to look away, to focus on the road. When I looked back, it said 9:23 p.m. I've heard other drivers talk about highway hypnosis. That state you get into on long, empty stretches of road where your mind drifts and time compresses. You snap back to awareness and realize you've driven 20 miles without really seeing any of it. Your body was on autopilot, handling the truck while your consciousness went somewhere else. This wasn't that. I was completely alert, completely aware of every detail. The hum of the engine, the way the steering wheel vibrated slightly in my hands, the reflection of my dashboard lights on the inside of the windshield. I wasn't zoning out. but time itself seemed to have become unstable, elastic, refusing to move forward at its normal pace. I tried to think rationally about what was happening. The fog could explain the disorientation. Low visibility, darkness, isolation. These things could play tricks on your perception. The sign I'd seen twice could have been two different signs, similar but not identical, and I'd just conflated them in my mind. The clock issue was probably just a malfunction, something electrical. But none of these explanations felt right. I kept driving. What else could I do? Pull over again and wait for the fog to clear? I'd already tried that at the overlook, and it had only made me more uneasy. At least while I was moving, I felt like I had some control over the situation. At least I was making progress towards somewhere. The road continued its serpentine path along the coast. I navigated curve after curve, each one identical to the last. Left turn, straight away, right turn, straight away. The pattern repeated endlessly. My headlights showed me the same view over and over. Pavement, white line, wall of fog. That's when I started noticing the mile markers. Highway 101 has mile markers every mile, small green signs that tell you exactly where you are. I'd passed thousands of them over the years, barely registering their presence. But now, in the fog, they became important. They were proof of forward motion, evidence that I was actually covering distance. Mile 67. 5 minutes later, mile 68. 5 minutes later, mile 69. The math didn't add up. At 20 miles per hour, I should be passing a mile marker every 3 minutes. But they were appearing every 5 minutes, sometimes longer. Was I going even slower than I thought? I checked my speedometer. Steady at 22 miles per hour. Mile 70. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My palms were sweating despite the cold. Something was definitely wrong, but I couldn't figure out what. The road felt normal under my tires. The engine sounded normal. Everything was functioning exactly as it should, except time and distance. Those had become unreliable. The jazz station on the radio cut out, replaced by static. I turned the dial, searching for another station, but found nothing, just white noise on every frequency. I turned it off. The silence pressed in on me. I found myself holding my breath, listening for something without knowing what. The ocean was still there, that constant background rush. But there seemed to be other sounds too, just at the edge of hearing. A rhythmic thumping that might have been my heartbeat, or might have been something else. A high-pitched tone that could have been tinnitus, or could have been real. Mile 71. I tried my phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual out here. There were plenty of dead zones along the coast, but it felt significant somehow, being completely cut off. No CB, no radio, no phone. Just me and Marion in this endless fog. I passed another sign. Mendocino. 47 miles. I knew Mendocino. A coastal town, population less than 1,000, known for its Victorian architecture and art galleries. A popular tourist destination. I'd driven through it many times, usually stopping for coffee at a place on Main Street that opened early. 47 miles at my current speed meant I'd be there in about 2 hours. I could stop there, wait for the fog to clear, maybe get some sleep. The thought was comforting. A destination, a goal, something to aim for. I drove on. The curves in the road seemed to tighten. I downshifted, taking them slower, feeling Marion lean slightly as we navigated each turn. My hands were cramping from gripping the wheel so hard. I flexed my fingers, tried to relax, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to be ready for something, that at any moment I might need to react quickly. That's when I saw the light. It was far ahead, or at least it seemed far ahead in the fog. A single point of light, yellowish white, stationary. My first thought was another vehicle, maybe stopped on the shoulder, but as I got closer I realized it was too high off the ground to be car headlights. And it wasn't moving. I slowed even more, approaching cautiously. The light resolved into a lamppost, the kind you see in small town centers or outside old motels. It stood alone on the right side of the road, illuminating nothing but fog. There was no building nearby, no driveway, no reason for a light to be there. I stopped next to it and looked up through my windshield. The lamp cast a circle of weak light that extended maybe 10 feet in all directions before being swallowed by darkness. Moths or some other insects swarmed around it, their shadows flickering across the pavement. I started to pull away, but something made me stop. I looked at the base of the lamppost. There was something there, a dark shape that didn't belong. I put Marion in park and grabbed my flashlight. The cold hit me again when I opened the door. It seemed colder now than it had been at the Overlook, the kind of damp cold that seeps into your bones. I walked to the lamppost, my flashlight beam joining its yellowed light. At the base of the post was a boot. Just one, a work boot, brown leather, well worn. Size looked like maybe a 10 or 11. It was lying on its side, laces still tied, as if someone had just stepped out of it and walked away. I looked around, shining my flashlight in all directions. The fog swallowed the beam within feet. There was no sign of the boot's owner, no other shoe, no footprints in the gravel beside the road. Just this one boot, sitting there for no reason I could understand. I should have left it. I should have gotten back in my truck and kept driving. But something made me pick it up. It was heavier than I expected, as if there was still a foot in it. But when I looked inside, it was empty, just a boot. I set it back down exactly where I'd found it and walked quickly back to Marion. My hands were shaking as I climbed into the cab. I locked the doors again, started driving. Mile 72. The lamppost disappeared behind me. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see it reappear somehow, but there was only fog and darkness. I tried to think about what the boot meant. Someone had lost it, obviously. Maybe a hitchhiker who'd stopped to rest and hadn't tied it properly. Maybe someone from a road crew who'd left it behind accidentally. There were innocent explanations. But why was it so heavy? Why did it feel like there was still weight in it? I pushed the thought away. The road descended slightly and I could sense rather than see the ocean getting closer. The sound of waves grew louder, more immediate. I was probably only 100 feet or so above sea level now, maybe less. The fog seemed to carry moisture from the water, tiny droplets that accumulated on my windshield between wiper swipes. Mile 73. Mile 74. Mile 75. I checked the time, 9:41 p.m. That wasn't possible. I'd been driving for hours, or at least it felt like hours. But according to the clock, only 18 minutes had passed since I'd left the Overlook. Unless I'd misread it earlier. Unless my memory was playing tricks on me. I tried to remember exactly what time I'd left Crescent City. 4 o'clock, I was sure of that. The dispatcher had noted it on the paperwork. 4 p.m. departure. That meant I should be somewhere around 11 p.m. now, maybe midnight. But the clock said 9:41 p.m. I grabbed my phone again, checked the time on it. The screen was dark. Dead battery? No, it had been at 60% when I'd checked it earlier. I tried turning it on, nothing. Just a black screen. The GPS was still working, though. The blue dot that represented me continued moving along the representation of Highway 101. According to the GPS, I was approaching mile marker 89, still about 30 miles from Mendocino. But the mile marker I'd just passed said 75. I pulled over again. I had to stop, had to think this through. The shoulder was narrow, barely wide enough for Marion, but I managed to get most of the truck off the road. I put on my hazard lights even though I hadn't seen another vehicle in what felt like hours. I sat there, engine idling, trying to make sense of the contradictions. The GPS said one thing, the mile markers said another. My truck's clock seemed frozen. My phone was dead. Time and distance had become unreliable, measured differently by different instruments. There had to be a logical explanation. Equipment malfunction. Multiple equipment malfunctions. The fog was interfering with signals somehow. GPS satellites, cell towers, even the simple mechanism of my dashboard clock, all affected by some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. But I'd driven through fog dozens of times, hundreds of times. I'd never experienced anything like this. I looked out at the fog surrounding me. It seemed alive somehow, breathing, pulsing. The way it moved in my headlights wasn't quite natural. It didn't just drift or flow. It seemed to have intention, pressing against my truck like something trying to get in. My CB crackled to life. I jumped, my heart hammering. I'd turned it off earlier, I was sure of it. But now it was on, filled with static that rose and fell in rhythmic waves. And underneath the static, something else, a voice maybe, or voices. Too distorted to make out words, but definitely human in origin. Speaking or singing or chanting something in a rhythm that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I reached for the CB, intending to turn it off again. But before my hand reached the dial, the static cleared for just a moment. A single voice came through, crystal clear, close enough that it could have been someone sitting in the cab with me. "You're still on the fog line," it said. Then the static returned, louder than before, and the voice was gone. I sat frozen, my hand hovering over the CB. Had I really heard that? "You're still on the fog line." What did that mean? The fog line. The white line at the edge of the road that I'd been following, using as my guide through the fog. Was that what the voice meant? Or was it something else, some meaning I wasn't grasping? I turned the CB off. This time I made sure, pressing the power button until the light went dark, unplugging it from the dash for good measure. Whatever was happening, I didn't want to hear any more voices. I put Marion back in gear and pulled onto the highway. The fog had texture now. That's the only way I can describe it. It wasn't just a visual phenomenon anymore, not just something that limited what I could see. It had become almost tactile, pressing against the windshield like something with substance. When I looked at it, really looked at it, I could see patterns in it. Swirls and eddies that moved in ways fog shouldn't move. I drove past mile marker 76. Then, 5 minutes later, mile marker 76 again. I didn't stop this time. I just noted it, added it to the growing list of impossible things that were happening. The same mile marker, twice. Like I was looping somehow, covering the same stretch of road over and over. But the road itself wasn't repeating. Each curve was different. Each section of pavement had its own character, its own small imperfections. I was moving forward, I was certain of that. The distance just wasn't being measured correctly, or distance itself had changed. The thought made my head hurt. I pushed it away, focused on driving. 1 mile at a time, one curve at a time. Eventually, I'd get through this fog. Eventually, it would clear and I'd find myself somewhere familiar. I saw another light ahead. Not a lamppost this time, but something moving. Headlights, I thought. Finally, another vehicle. Someone else on this road. Proof that I wasn't completely alone. I flashed my high beams in greeting. The other lights didn't respond. They just kept moving. Steady and slow, roughly parallel to my position. After a moment, I realized they weren't on the road at all. They were out over the ocean, moving through the fog maybe 50 feet above the water. A boat? No, boats didn't fly. A helicopter? The lights were wrong for that, and I couldn't hear any rotor noise. I slowed down, watching the lights. They moved in a straight line, not affected by wind or weather, impossibly steady. Then they went out, not dimming or fading, but just ceasing to exist, like someone had flipped a switch. I realized I'd been holding my breath. I exhaled slowly, my hands trembling on the wheel. Not another vehicle then. Not anything I could explain or categorize. Just another impossible thing in a night that had become a catalog of impossibilities. Mile marker 77. I almost laughed. Progress. Actual, measurable progress. I was moving forward, even if it was only 1 mile at a time, even if the numbers didn't match my GPS or make sense with the amount of time that had passed. The road surface changed. I felt it through the steering wheel and the seat, a different texture under my tires. Looking down, I saw that the pavement had become darker, almost black, and perfectly smooth. No cracks, no patches, no wear marks. It looked new, as if it had just been laid, but I'd driven this section of 101 many times and I'd never seen fresh pavement here. The white line was still there, though, still guiding me forward. I kept my eyes on it. That's when I noticed the timing. I'd been following the white line for what felt like hours, never deviating, never losing sight of it even in the thickest fog. But now I realized something odd. The line never curved. It stayed perfectly straight, even though the road itself was full of curves and turns. I was turning the wheel, navigating bends in the highway, but the white line in front of me remained straight as a ruler. Geometrically, that didn't make sense. Unless I wasn't actually turning. Unless my perception of turning was false and I was really driving in a straight line. But I could feel the truck leaning into curves. I could feel the G-forces, subtle but present. The curves were real. Unless they weren't. Unless everything I was feeling was somehow manufactured. False sensory input my brain was creating to make sense of something it couldn't process. I shook my head violently, trying to clear it. This kind of thinking was dangerous. Start doubting your own senses and you could drive yourself crazy. The road was real. The fog was real. I was real. Whatever else was happening, I had to hold on to those basic facts. Mile marker 78, then mile marker 78 again, then mile marker 77. The numbers were going backward now. I was losing ground instead of gaining it. Or the markers themselves were lying, scrambled by the same force that had scrambled everything else. I checked my fuel gauge. 3/4 full. I'd started with a full tank, so that meant I'd used only 1/4 of it. At my average fuel consumption, that meant I'd driven maybe 150 miles. But according to my GPS, I'd barely moved 20 miles from the overlook. And according to the mile markers, I was oscillating between 76 and 78, going nowhere. The numbers didn't reconcile. Couldn't reconcile. I saw a sign ahead, scenic turnout, 1 mile. I didn't recognize this one. There were dozens of scenic turnouts along this stretch, and I didn't have them all memorized. But something about this sign bothered me. The font was wrong, slightly off from the standard highway department style. And the metal looked old, rusted around the edges, despite the fog's moisture which should have kept rust from forming so heavily. A mile later, or what felt like a mile, or what the odometer measured as a mile, I reached the turnout. It was larger than most, a crescent of pavement big enough for several cars. There was a single picnic table, and beyond it, a guardrail marking the cliff edge. And there was a truck. Not just any truck. A rig almost identical to Marion. Same model Kenworth, same dark blue paint, same chrome accents. It was backed into a parking spot, facing out toward the road, as if ready to leave at any moment. But there were no lights on in the cab, no engine running, just a dark, silent truck sitting in the fog. I pulled in next to it and stopped. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the other truck. The similarity was uncanny. Not just the same model, but the same year, the same configuration. Even the same small dent in the bumper that I'd gotten last year backing into a loading dock in Portland. I grabbed my flashlight and got out. The cold was intense now, well below what it should have been for late October on the coast. My breath came out in clouds that hung in the still air before dissipating. I walked to the other truck and shined my flashlight on the driver's door. The company logo was there, Pacific North Logistics, same as mine. I walked around to the back, looked at the license plate. Oregon plates, same as Marion. The plate number was different, though. 1 digit off from mine. Where Marion's plate ended in 437, this one ended in 438. I tried the driver's door. Locked. I cupped my hands against the window and looked inside. The interior was dark, but I could make out shapes. A coffee mug in the cup holder. Papers on the passenger seat. A jacket hanging from the hook behind the driver's seat. And something else. Something that made my stomach drop. On the dashboard, just visible in the beam of my flashlight, was a family photo in a small frame. I couldn't see the details, but the size and shape were identical to a photo I kept in the same spot in Marion's cab. A picture of my grandmother, the one I'd named the truck after. I backed away from the truck quickly, my heart pounding. This wasn't just similar to my truck, it was too similar. Almost like a copy, a duplicate created by someone who'd seen Marion but gotten a few details wrong. I looked around the turnout. The fog was thicker here, if that was possible. I could barely see the guardrail 10 feet away. The ocean sound was muted, distant, as if the fog was absorbing it. The picnic table caught my attention. I walked over to it, shining my flashlight across the surface. Someone had carved something into the wood, letters deep and deliberate. Turn back while you can. The carving looked old. The wood weathered around the edges of each letter. This hadn't been done recently. It had been here for months, maybe years. But the message felt immediate, urgent, meant specifically for me. I heard something behind me. Not a clear sound, just a sense of movement, of air being displaced. I spun around, flashlight cutting through the fog. The other truck was still there, dark and silent. Marion was beyond it, my headlights creating a weak pool of light. But there was something else now. A shape, just at the edge of visibility. Darker than the fog, roughly human in size, standing between the two trucks. I called out, "Hello? You need help?" The shape didn't move, didn't respond, just stood there, dark and still. I took a step toward it, then stopped. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get back in Marion and leave. Not to investigate, not to get closer, just to run. I listened to those instincts. I walked backward toward my truck, keeping my flashlight trained on the shape. It still didn't move. As I got closer to Marion, I could see more details. It wasn't quite human-shaped after all. The proportions were wrong, the limbs too long, the body too narrow. I climbed into the cab and locked the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I've never been more grateful for that sound. I looked back at the other truck and the shape. Both were still there, unchanged. I put Marion in gear and pulled out of the turnout. I drove faster now, 25 miles per hour, then 30. The fog was just as thick, but I didn't care anymore. I needed to put distance between myself and that turnout, needed to move forward, even if forward had lost all meaning. Mile marker 79. Mile marker 80. Mile marker 81. The numbers were climbing again, which should have been encouraging. But I couldn't trust them. Couldn't trust anything anymore. The road began to feel familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. Each curve, each slight rise and fall, seemed like something I'd experienced before. Not just on previous trips, but tonight, in the last few hours. As if I was traveling in a loop, passing the same points over and over. I saw the sign, Ocean Viewpoint, 2 miles. My hands tightened on the wheel. Not again. Please, not again. 2 miles later, there it was. The same overlook, the same guardrail, the same weak yellow light. But something was different this time. There was a truck in the parking area. A dark blue Kenworth W900 with chrome accents. Marion's twin from the scenic turnout. Or was it Marion herself? The thought hit me like ice water. What if I'd never left the overlook? What if I'd been sitting here the whole time and everything else, the drive, the boot, the lamppost, the other truck, had all been some kind of hallucination brought on by exhaustion or carbon monoxide or something I couldn't name? I pulled in next to the truck and stopped. I got out, my legs unsteady. The truck next to me was dark, no one in the cab. I walked around it, checking the license plate. It ended in 437, same as mine. I looked back at my own truck. The plate there also ended in 437. 2 trucks, identical plates, which meant one of them wasn't real. I walked to the guardrail, looked out into the fog. The ocean was out there somewhere, invisible and infinite. I could hear it, that constant rush of waves that suddenly sounded less like water and more like breathing. Behind me, I heard an engine start. I turned. One of the trucks was idling now. I couldn't tell which one. They looked identical in the fog, both dark shapes with headlights glowing. The truck began to move, pulling out of the parking area onto the highway. I watched it go, disappearing south into the fog. The taillights faded quickly, swallowed by the gray. I looked at the remaining truck. Was it mine? Or was mine the one that had just left? I walked to it, tried the door. It opened. The interior was familiar. My coffee mug, my papers, my jacket. The family photo on the dashboard. Everything exactly where it should be. I climbed into the cab and closed the door. The key was in the ignition. I turned it, and the engine started immediately. Marion's engine, with its particular rhythm and sound that I'd know anywhere. I sat there for a long time trying to decide what to do. Follow the other truck? Stay here and wait for the fog to clear? Turn around and head back north, abandon this run entirely? The CB crackled. I'd unplugged it, I was certain. But the static was back, rising and falling in those same rhythmic waves. And then a voice, clear and close. You're still on the fog line. You've always been on the fog line. I looked down at the road in front of me. The white line stretched away into the fog, perfectly straight, perfectly consistent. The line that had guided me for hours, the line I'd followed without question because it was the only thing I could trust. The line that might not lead anywhere at all. I put Marion in gear and pulled back onto the highway. What else could I do? Sitting still felt like giving up, like accepting something I wasn't ready to accept. As long as I kept moving, there was hope that the fog would clear, that I'd eventually reach Mendocino or some other recognizable place. Mile marker 82, mile marker 81, mile marker 80, backward again. But I was driving forward. I was certain of it. The road unspooled ahead of me, new pavement I hadn't seen before. I wasn't looping, I was moving through space, just not through distance. The clock on my dashboard still read 9:41 p.m. Hours had passed, I knew they had, but time had stopped advancing. Or I had stopped advancing through time. or time had become something else entirely, something that couldn't be measured by clocks. I saw lights ahead, not the yellow lamppost, not the flying lights over the ocean. Red lights. Taillights. A vehicle ahead of me moving slowly through the fog. Relief flooded through me. Another driver. Someone else on this road. I wasn't alone. I sped up slightly, closing the distance. The taillights grew larger, clearer. A truck, a semi from the height and spacing of the lights. Moving at maybe 20 miles per hour, following the white line just like I was. I got closer, maybe 30 feet back. Close enough to see details through the fog. The truck was a Kenworth W900. Dark blue with chrome accents. The license plate ended in 437. I was following myself. Or something was following me, using my own image as a disguise. Or the road had folded somehow, creating a loop where my own vehicle appeared ahead of me. I slowed down, letting the distance between us grow. The taillights faded back into the fog. I watched them disappear, counted to 10, then sped up again. The lights reappeared, same distance, same truck, following the same white line through the same fog. I tried turning off my headlights, thinking maybe the truck ahead would disappear if I couldn't see it. But when I flipped the switch, my dashboard went dark, my engine cut out, and Marion began to slow. I quickly turned the lights back on, and everything resumed. The truck ahead was still there. I tried the CB one more time, even though I'd unplugged it. Static filled the cab, but underneath it I could hear something new. Music. The same jazz program I'd been listening to hours ago. The saxophone solo wound through the static, clear and melancholy, and then a voice speaking over the music. The fog line run. Some drivers start it. None of them finish it. You just keep driving, keep following that white line, thinking you're making progress. But the line goes nowhere. It's just a line in the fog. The static surged, drowning out the voice. I reached for the CB to turn it off, but stopped. Because the voice had sounded familiar. Not like the other voices I'd heard tonight. This one I recognized. It had sounded like me. The road ahead curved sharply to the right. I followed it, turning the wheel, feeling Marion lean into the curve. The white line curved with me, staying at the edge of my vision, constant and reliable. Except when I came out of the curve, I was facing the opposite direction. North instead of south. The GPS confirmed it. The little blue dot had flipped, was now moving back the way I'd come. But I hadn't turned around. I'd just followed the curve in the road. The road had turned me around without me realizing it. I corrected course, making a U-turn to head south again. The GPS dot flipped back. Everything seemed normal for about 30 seconds. Then the road curved again, and again I came out facing north. I corrected again. The pattern repeated. Every curve was rotating me, spinning me around so gradually that I couldn't feel it happening. I was driving in circles, following the white line in circles. The realization should have terrified me more than it did, but I'd moved beyond terror into something else, a kind of numb acceptance. Nothing made sense. The rules of reality had been suspended. I was trapped in something that operated by logic I couldn't understand. So I kept driving, because stopping seemed worse than moving, even if the movement was pointless, even if I was going nowhere. Mile marker 76, mile marker 77, mile marker 76, mile marker 78, mile marker 76. The numbers jumped randomly now, not even pretending to follow a sequence. The mile markers themselves seemed to shift position, appearing on the left side of the road instead of the right, or in the middle of the lane, or floating above the pavement. I drove past the boot again. Still there at the base of that lone lamppost. Or maybe a different boot. There was no way to tell. I drove past the scenic turnout. The dark blue Kenworth was there, or maybe it wasn't. The fog made it hard to be certain. I drove past the Ocean View Point overlook, empty this time, or maybe I was the one parked there, watching myself drive by. The boundaries between events were dissolving. Past and present and future all existing simultaneously, all accessible at once. I'd driven this road before. I was driving it now. I would drive it forever. All of those statements were true. The CB spoke. You can stop anytime. Just pull over. Step out of the truck. Walk into the fog. It's easier than you think. I didn't respond. I kept my hands on the wheel, my eyes on the white line. The voice continued. There are others out here. Drivers who made the same choice you did. To keep going instead of stopping. To follow the line instead of trusting their instincts. They're still driving too. You'll see them eventually. Or maybe you already have. The dark blue Kenworth in the overlook. The truck I'd been following, my own taillights appearing ahead of me in the fog. How many of us were there? How many drivers trapped on the fog line, circling endlessly through the same impossible miles? I checked my fuel gauge. Still 3/4 full. No matter how far I drove, it never changed. Infinite fuel for an infinite journey. The fog began to glow. Not brighter, but different. A kind of phosphorescence, like deep-sea creatures emit. The pavement glowed too, and the white line, and my own hands on the steering wheel. Everything taking on that eerie light. I thought about stopping. The voice was right. It would be easy. Just pull over, turn off the engine, step out into the fog. Let it take me wherever it took the others. But I didn't. Some stubborn part of me refused to give up, refused to accept that this was all there was, that I'd spend eternity driving through fog on a highway that went nowhere. So I kept going. Mile marker 76. And that's where I still am, if am means anything anymore. If still has any meaning in a place where time doesn't move. I'm on Highway 1001 southbound, somewhere between Crescent City and Mendocino, following the white fog line through the endless gray, passing the same mile markers, seeing the same landmarks, driving the same curves over and over. The truck's clock reads 9:41 p.m. It always reads 9:41 p.m. The GPS says I'm 20 miles from where I started. The mile markers say I'm looping through a 3-mile stretch. The odometer says I've driven 8,000 miles since this began. All of those things are true. None of them matter. Sometimes I see other trucks in the fog. Dark shapes moving parallel to me, just visible at the edge of my headlights. I don't try to reach them anymore. I know what they are. Reflections, echoes, other versions of myself or other drivers who made the same mistake I did. The CB occasionally crackles with voices. Other truckers, maybe, calling out to each other across the fog. Or just the same voice repeating endlessly, offering the same advice I'll never take. Stop. Pull over. Walk into the fog. It's easier than you think. But I won't stop. I can't. Because stopping means admitting that the fog line doesn't lead anywhere, that I've been following it for nothing. As long as I keep driving, I can tell myself I'm making progress. That eventually the fog will clear, that eventually I'll see sunlight again. The truth is simpler and more terrible. I know where the fog line leads now. I've known for a while. Maybe I knew from the beginning. From the moment I decided not to pull over at the first sign of trouble. The fog line leads back to itself. A perfect circle, a loop with no exit, and I'm still driving it, following that white line through the gray, watching the mile markers flip backward and forward, listening to the voices on the CB offer advice I can't take. I'll be here tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. unless tomorrow never comes, unless today never ends, unless this moment right now, my hands on the wheel, my eyes on the line, the fog pressing against my windshield, is the only moment there is, repeating forever, a single second stretched into eternity. I used to be a trucker who ran freight up and down the Pacific coast. Now I'm something else. Something that drives but never arrives. Something that moves but never changes position. Something that follows the fog line forever, because that's all there is to follow. And stopping would mean facing what I've become. So I drive, through the fog, following the line. And if you're ever on Highway 101 late at night and you see a dark blue Kenworth in your mirrors, appearing and disappearing in the fog, following the same path you're following, don't slow down. Don't pull over to check if I need help. Because I don't need help. I'm exactly where I chose to be, the moment I decided the white line was more trustworthy than my own instincts. I'm still on the fog line. I'll always be on the fog line. And the terrible thing is, I'm starting to think that's exactly where I belong. My name is Jack Briggs, and I've been hauling freight along the West Coast for the better part of 9 years. Before that, I did a stint in the Navy, 4 years on a destroyer out of San Diego. When I got out, I thought I'd miss the ocean, thought I'd need to stay close to it. Turns out, driving the coastal routes was the perfect compromise. I get to see the Pacific every day, but I sleep in my own bed most nights, not some cramped bunk with 40 other guys snoring around me. I work for a company called Cascade Freight Solutions, based out of Eugene, Oregon. We're a mid-sized operation, maybe 30 drivers total, running everything from Portland down to Los Angeles and back. The pay is steady, the equipment is well maintained, and the dispatchers actually listen when you call in with a problem. After some of the outfits I worked for when I first started, that's worth its weight in gold. My truck is a 2020 Peterbilt 579, white with green accents that match the company colors. I call her Betty, after my ex-wife. We're both stubborn. We both require constant maintenance, and we both get temperamental when we don't get enough sleep. But when things are running smooth, there's nothing better. This particular run started on a Wednesday in early November. I'd picked up a load of electronics in Portland. Laptops, monitors, peripherals, that kind of thing. All destined for a tech distributor in Santa Barbara. The manifest said the load was worth about $200,000, which meant I had to be extra careful. We carried insurance, but losing a load like that would still put a black mark on your record. The dispatcher who handed me the paperwork was a woman named Rita Holloway. She'd been with the company since before I started, knew every route and every driver by name. She looked at the weather forecast and frowned. "You might want to take I-5 instead of 101, she said. Storm system moving in off the Pacific. Could get nasty on the coast." I considered it. I-5 was faster, straighter, easier driving. But it was also boring as hell, just endless miles of valley farmland with nothing to look at. And I'd driven through coastal storms before. Heavy rain, sure, but nothing I couldn't handle. "I'll stick with 101, I said. "I know that road like the back of my hand." Rita shrugged. "Your call, just be careful. And if it gets too bad, pull over. That load isn't worth your life." I signed the paperwork and headed out. It was just after noon. Clear skies in Portland. Temperature in the low 50s. Perfect driving weather. I merged onto I-5 southbound, planning to cut over to 101 once I got past Salem. The first hour was easy, traffic light, Betty running smooth. I switched to 101 near Corvallis and immediately felt better. The road was narrower, more winding, but it felt right. I passed through small towns with names like Waldport and Yakats. places that swelled with tourists in the summer but were quiet now in November. The ocean appeared and disappeared on my right, gray-green and restless under cloudy skies. By mid-afternoon, the weather started to change. The clouds thickened and dropped lower, turning the sky the color of slate. The wind picked up, buffeting Betty hard enough that I had to correct my steering. Rain started, light at first, then heavier, drumming on the roof of the cab in a steady rhythm. I turned on my wipers and settled in for wet driving. This was normal coastal weather, nothing to worry about. My headlights cut through the rain, and I kept my speed reasonable, maybe 50 in the 65 zones. Other vehicles were scarce. Most people had the sense to stay off the roads when it got like this. Around 5 p.m., just as the early November darkness was starting to set in, my GPS did something strange. I'd been using the same GPS unit for 3 years, a Garmin truck-specific model that knew about bridge clearances and weight restrictions. It had never given me a bad direction, but as I was coming up on a section of highway I'd driven dozens of times, the GPS suddenly announced, "In 1 mile, turn right onto Highway 1A. I frowned. There was no Highway 1A. Highway 1 ran along the California coast further south, but here in Oregon, there was just 101. No alternate routes, no Highway 1A. I glanced at the GPS screen. Sure enough, it showed a road branching off to the right, marked as HWY 1A, in the same font as all the other roads. The line was solid, indicating a paved highway, not some dirt logging road. "Recalculating," I said out loud, pressing the screen to cancel the direction. The GPS beeped, then gave the same instruction. "In 1 mile, turn right onto Highway 1A. This route will save you 47 minutes. 47 minutes was significant. That would put me in Santa Barbara well ahead of schedule, maybe even early enough to unload tonight instead of waiting until morning. But I'd never seen a Highway 1A on any map, and I'd studied the coastal routes extensively. I pulled up the GPS menu and switched to map view. The Highway 1A showed clearly, a line running roughly parallel to 101 but cutting inland, bypassing several towns and a long stretch of winding coastline. According to the map, it reconnected with 101 about 60 miles south, near the California border. A shortcut, a faster route, exactly the kind of thing a GPS was supposed to find for you. But I'd never heard of it, and in 9 years of driving this coast, I'd never seen a sign for Highway 1A. I checked my phone, pulling up Google Maps. It showed only Highway 101, no alternate routes. I tried Apple Maps. Same thing. Only the Garmin was showing this Highway 1A. The rain was getting heavier now, visibility dropping. I was about a mile from where the GPS said the turnoff would be. I had to make a decision. The logical choice was to ignore it. Stick to the route I knew, the road I could see on multiple maps. The GPS was glitching somehow, showing a road that didn't exist. But what if it wasn't a glitch? What if this was a real road that just wasn't on the consumer maps yet? New highways got built all the time. Maybe this was a recently completed project that hadn't made it into Google's database yet. The Garmin was a truck-specific unit, updated regularly. It might have information that the phone apps didn't. 47 minutes. That was the deciding factor. I was tired, ready to be done with this run. If I could shave 47 minutes off my drive, I could unload tonight, grab a hot meal, and sleep in a real bed instead of the sleeper berth. I slowed down, watching for the turnoff. It appeared exactly where the GPS said it would. A standard green highway sign, white letters. Highway 1A South. An arrow pointing right. The sign looked official, same style as every other highway sign on the West Coast. I put on my turn signal, even though there was no one behind me to see it. Old habit from the Navy. signal your intentions, follow procedure. I turned right onto Highway 1A. The road was paved, 2 lanes, well maintained. It curved away from 101, heading inland through dense forest. No streetlights, but the lane markings were fresh and reflective. My headlights picked out mile markers and occasional warning signs for curves. Everything looked normal, legitimate, exactly like a state highway should look. I relaxed a bit. This was real. A real road, properly marked, properly maintained. The GPS had been right after all. The rain continued to fall, steady and heavy. My wipers worked overtime, and I kept my speed down to 40. The road climbed slightly, gaining elevation as it moved away from the coast. The forest pressed in on both sides, dense stands of Douglas fir and Sitka spruce that looked black in the darkness. I checked the GPS. It showed me on Highway 1A, the blue dot moving steadily along the line. Estimated time to Santa Barbara had dropped by 45 minutes. I smiled. Good choice, Briggs. Trust your equipment. 5 miles in, I passed a small green sign, Coastal Scenic Route. Below it, in smaller letters, next services 58 miles, 58 miles. That was a long stretch without gas stations or rest stops, but I had 3/4 of a tank, plenty to get me back to 101. I made a mental note to fill up once I reached the coast again. The road continued to climb. I could feel the grade, gentle but persistent. Betty's engine worked a little harder, the RPMs climbing slightly. According to the GPS, I was gaining elevation, moving up into the coastal range. That made sense. A shortcut inland would have to cross the mountains rather than following the winding coastal route. 10 miles in, I noticed something odd. There were no other vehicles. Not ahead of me, not behind me, not a single car going the opposite direction. On Highway 101, even in bad weather, you'd see someone every few minutes. But here on Highway 1A, I was completely alone. Maybe the road was too new. Maybe it hadn't been publicized yet, so only GPS units knew about it. Or maybe the weather was keeping people off the roads entirely. Both explanations made sense. But something about the isolation bothered me. I turned on my CB radio, scanning through the channels. Usually, you could pick up some chatter, truckers talking about road conditions or weather, or just shooting the breeze to stay awake. But all I got was static, white noise that rose and fell in strange patterns. I tried my phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual in the coastal mountains, lots of dead zones where the terrain blocked the cell towers. I wasn't worried. I had the GPS, and it was working fine. 15 miles in, the road leveled out. I was on some kind of plateau, the forest still thick on both sides. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, visibility improving slightly. In my headlights, I could see that the pavement was perfect, not a single pothole or crack. Whoever had built this road had done quality work. I checked the time, 6:23 p.m. I'd been on Highway 1A for about 20 minutes. According to the GPS, I had another 40 miles before rejoining 101. Call it another hour at my current speed. Still putting me way ahead of schedule. That's when I saw the first animal. It darted across the road about 50 feet in front of me, moving right to left. In the brief moment it was caught in my headlights, I got an impression of something large and dark. A deer, probably, or maybe an elk. They were common in these forests, but it moved wrong. Too fast, too low to the ground. The shape wasn't quite right either. The proportions off somehow. I slowed down, watching the tree line. If there was one animal, there might be more. The last thing I needed was to hit a deer with a $200,000 load in the back. Nothing else appeared. The forest remained dark and still. I kept driving, but slower now, maybe 35 miles per hour. 20 miles in, I passed another sign. Steep grade ahead, 6% decline. Trucks use lower gear. I downshifted, feeling Betty's engine brake engage. The road began to descend, winding down the far side of the plateau. The curves were tight, hairpin turns that required my full attention. I'd been right to slow down. At the apex of one curve, my headlights swept across something that made me brake hard. There, at the edge of the road, was a vehicle. An old pickup truck, maybe from the 70s, pulled halfway into the ditch. The driver's door was open, the interior light on. I stopped Betty about 30 feet away and put on my hazard lights. The rain had picked up again, and I could barely see the truck through my windshield. I grabbed my flashlight and my rain jacket. The cold hit me when I opened the door. It had dropped at least 15 degrees since I'd left Portland. My breath came out in visible puffs. I zipped up my jacket and walked toward the pickup. It was a Ford F-150. Orange paint faded to pale peach, rust eating at the wheel wells. The Oregon license plate was so old, it was the blue and white style they'd stopped using in the 90s. The truck looked abandoned, but the interior light suggested someone had been here recently. I shined my flashlight through the open driver's door. The keys were in the ignition, turned to the off position. The bench seat was empty. No personal items, no trash. The glove box hung open, papers scattered across the passenger seat. I checked the bed of the truck. Empty, except for a spare tire and some tools. No signs of what might have brought the truck here or where the driver had gone. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded flat in the rain. "Anyone need help?" No response. Just the sound of water dripping from the trees and the idle of Betty's engine behind me. I looked at the ground, trying to find footprints, but the rain had turned everything to mud. If someone had walked away from here, their tracks were gone. I should have called it in, reported an abandoned vehicle. But my phone had no signal, and my CB wasn't picking up anything but static. I made a mental note to report it when I got back to 101, when I could reach a dispatcher. I walked back to Betty, my flashlight sweeping the tree line one more time. For just a moment, I thought I saw something standing among the trees. A figure, tall and thin, watching me. But when I focused my light on the spot, there was nothing. Just shadows and rain. I climbed back into the cab, locked the door, and put Betty in gear. As I pulled away, I checked my mirrors. The pickup's interior light was still on, casting a weak glow on the empty seat. I drove faster now, wanting to put distance between myself and that truck. Something about it felt wrong, though I couldn't articulate exactly what. Maybe it was just the strangeness of finding an abandoned vehicle on a road that supposedly no one else was using. 25 miles in, the GPS showed me halfway to the reconnection point with 101. I'd covered good distance despite the weather and the curves. Betty was running well. No warning lights, no problems. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The road leveled out again after the steep descent, running through a valley I didn't recognize. The forest had changed character somehow. The trees were denser, older, their branches hanging low over the road like arthritic fingers. Even with my headlights and the occasional flash of lightning from the storm, the darkness felt absolute, swallowing everything beyond the immediate stretch of pavement. 30 miles in, I started seeing more signs, but they were strange, not quite right. "Watch for falling rocks," one said, but the sign was mounted backward, facing away from the road, as if warning people in the forest rather than drivers. "Bridge ahead, 5 tons max," read another. But there was no bridge. The road continued straight. No water, no ravine, nothing that would require a bridge. I told myself these were just old signs, remnants from when the road was being built. They'd probably remove them once construction was fully complete. But it added to the growing sense of unease that had been building since I'd turned onto Highway 1A. The GPS still showed me on course, the blue dot moving steadily. 28 miles until I rejoined 101. Less than an hour now. I just needed to keep driving. That's when I noticed the mile markers weren't sequential. I passed one that said 37. A few minutes later, one that said 22, then 41, then 18. They appeared at irregular intervals, the numbers jumping around randomly, like someone had installed them without any plan or system. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were measuring distance from some point other than where I'd entered the highway. Maybe they were old markers from a different road that had occupied this route before. Maybe they weren't mile markers at all, but some other kind of indicator I didn't understand. But the explanation didn't sit right. Mile markers were standardized, regulated. You didn't just put them up randomly. 35 miles in, I saw something that made me slow down again. There, in the middle of the road, was a pile of what looked like clothes. I stopped Betty about 20 feet away, put on my hazards, and grabbed my flashlight. The rain had lessened to a light mist. I approached the pile carefully, my flashlight beam revealing details. It was clothes, a jacket, jeans, boots. But they were laid out in a pattern, arranged like someone had carefully placed them to form the outline of a person. Arms spread, legs straight, the jacket positioned where a torso would be. I looked around, expecting to see someone watching, waiting to jump out and laugh at the prank. But the forest remained silent and dark. No movement, no sound except for the drip of water from the trees. I bent down to examine the clothes more closely. They were wet, soaked through from the rain, but they looked relatively new, not faded or worn. The jacket was a Gore-Tex hiking shell, expensive. The boots were Timberlands, barely broken in. I reached out to touch the jacket, then stopped. Something about disturbing the arrangement felt wrong, like breaking a rule I didn't know existed. I stood up and backed away, keeping my light on the clothes until I reached Betty. I climbed into the cab and drove around the pile, giving it a wide berth. In my mirror, I watched it disappear into the darkness behind me. What the hell was this road? I checked the GPS again, hoping to see that I'd somehow missed the reconnection point, that I was already back on 101, but no, still 20 miles to go. Still on Highway 1A, that thin line cutting through the mountains. I tried the CB again. This time, instead of just static, I heard something else. A voice, distant and distorted, like it was coming from very far away. I couldn't make out words, just the rise and fall of someone speaking. I picked up the receiver. "This is Unit 437, southbound on Highway 1A. Does anyone copy?" The voice stopped. Silence, then static, then the voice again. Still unintelligible, but it seemed to be responding to me. I tried again. "I'm not reading you clearly. If you can hear me, please repeat." The static surged, then cleared for just a moment. A single phrase came through, clear as if the speaker were sitting next to me. "Turn back. The road doesn't go where you think." Then static again, drowning out everything. I stared at the CB, my heart pounding. Turn back. But I was 35 miles in. Turning back meant covering all that distance again, all those curves and descents and those strange signs. Forward was only 20 miles. Even if something was wrong, forward was shorter. I put the receiver down and kept driving. 40 miles in. The GPS showed 10 miles until the reconnection point. 10 miles until I'd be back on familiar ground, back on a road I knew and trusted. The trees had started to thin out. I could see more sky now, clouds racing overhead, occasional breaks where moonlight filtered through. The pavement was still perfect, still well maintained, but there was something about the road that felt increasingly surreal, like I was driving through a photograph rather than a real place. I saw another vehicle ahead. A semi parked on the shoulder, lights off. As I approached, I could see it was old, maybe from the 80s. The company logo on the side was faded beyond recognition. The trailer looked empty, doors hanging open. I slowed but didn't stop. After the pickup and the clothes, I didn't want to investigate another abandoned vehicle. I just wanted to get back to 101. As I passed the semi, my headlights swept across the cab. For a fraction of a second, I saw someone sitting in the driver's seat. A figure, dark and still, head turned toward me. I jerked my eyes back to the road, my hands tight on the wheel. When I checked my mirror, the cab was empty, or appeared empty, or I hadn't really seen anyone at all. I pressed harder on the accelerator. Betty surged forward, faster than I should have been going on an unfamiliar road, but I didn't care anymore. I needed to get back to 101. I needed to be somewhere that made sense. 45 miles in, 5 miles to the reconnection point. The GPS showed it clearly, a Y intersection where Highway 1A merged back into 101. Almost there. Almost safe. The rain had stopped completely now. The clouds were breaking up, revealing patches of stars. In the moonlight, I could see that the landscape had changed. The forest was gone, replaced by open ground covered in low scrub. To my right, I could see the ocean, dark and vast, much closer than it should have been. Wait, that didn't make sense. Highway 1A had taken me inland, up into the mountains. There was no way I should be seeing the ocean now, unless the road had curved back toward the coast without me realizing it, unless my sense of direction had become completely confused. I checked the GPS. It still showed me heading south, parallel to the coast but miles inland. But my own eyes showed me the ocean, right there, maybe 100 yards away. I could hear the waves, that constant rush and roar. The GPS was wrong. Or my eyes were wrong. One of them had to be lying. I slowed down, trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what the GPS was telling me. The road ahead split into 2 lanes, just as the GPS had shown. The left lane continued as Highway 1A. The right lane curved away, marked with a sign, Highway 1 South. Relief flooded through me. There it was, the reconnection point. I'd made it. I moved into the right lane, following the curve toward 101. But as I committed to the turn, something made me glance left, down the continuing stretch of Highway 1A. In the moonlight, I could see the road extending into the distance, perfectly straight, heading toward a horizon that looked wrong somehow. Too low, or too dark, or too close. And there, standing in the middle of that continuing road, was a figure. Tall, thin, completely motionless. Too far away to see details, but close enough to know it was watching me. I completed my turn onto what the sign said was Highway 101 and accelerated hard. I didn't look back. The road I'd turned onto didn't feel like Highway 101. It was too narrow, too rough. The pavement was cracked and weathered, not like the well-maintained coastal highway I knew. But the sign had said 101, and the GPS agreed. I was back on the main highway heading south toward California. I should have felt relief. Instead, the unease that had been building all evening reached a new intensity. Something about this road felt wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. The curves were too tight, the grade too steep, the trees too close on both sides. I checked my speed, 30 miles per hour. I checked my GPS, Highway 101 South, as it should be. I checked my mirrors, empty darkness behind me. Everything was normal, everything was fine. Except it wasn't. I'd driven Highway 101 dozens of times. I knew every town, every landmark, every stretch of coastline. But nothing I was seeing matched my memory. The road climbed when it should have descended. It curved left when I expected it to curve right. The ocean, which should have been on my right, was nowhere to be seen. I passed a sign. Entering Sierra Cove. population 3 in 47. I'd never heard of Sierra Cove. I'd studied maps of the entire coastal route, memorized every town no matter how small. There was no Sierra Cove on Highway 101, anywhere. The town appeared in my headlights. A single street with maybe a dozen buildings, all dark. No streetlights, no signs of life. Just empty structures pressed close to the road, their windows like vacant eyes watching me pass. I drove slowly through the town, my foot hovering over the brake. Every instinct I had was screaming that I should stop, should turn around, should get off this road immediately. But turn around to where? Back to Highway 1A? Back to that figure standing in the road? Forward was the only option. Forward had to lead somewhere real eventually. The town ended as abruptly as it had begun. One moment I was passing between dark buildings. The next I was back in open country with forest on both sides. I checked my GPS. It showed no town, no Sierra Cove, just a blank stretch of Highway 101. I was breathing hard, my heart hammering against my ribs. I forced myself to slow down, to think rationally. The GPS had to be right. It was satellite-based, updated regularly, maintained by a company whose entire business model depended on accuracy. If it said I was on Highway 101, I was on Highway 101. But my eyes said otherwise. Everything I was seeing contradicted what the GPS showed. And I trusted my eyes. I trusted my own memory of this route. I'd driven it too many times to be this confused. I needed to stop and figure out what was happening. I needed to check a paper map, compare it to the GPS, maybe even backtrack to a point I recognized. But there was nowhere to pull over. The road was too narrow, the shoulders too soft. I could see tire tracks where other vehicles had tried to pull off and gotten stuck in the mud. So I kept driving, looking for a safe place to stop. 5 miles past Sierra Cove, I saw a rest area sign. Coastal viewpoint, 1 mile. Finally, somewhere to pull over. Somewhere to collect my thoughts. The rest area appeared on schedule. A small paved lot with a single picnic table and a viewing platform. I pulled in and stopped, putting Betty in a park but leaving the engine running. I wasn't ready to shut down completely, not yet. I grabbed my atlas from the storage compartment behind the seat. It was 3 years old, but roads didn't change that much in 3 years. I flipped to the Oregon coast page and traced Highway 11 with my finger. From Crescent City south to the California border, there was no Highway 1A. No alternate route, no shortcut, no inland bypass. Just 101. Following the coast. Winding and slow. Exactly as I'd always known it. But I'd driven on Highway 1A. I'd seen the signs, felt the curves, passed the mile markers. It had been real. As real as the steering wheel in my hands. I checked the GPS. It showed me on Highway 101, about 10 miles north of the California border. According to it, I'd never left the coastal highway. Highway 1A wasn't in its database, wasn't on its map. As far as the GPS was concerned, I'd been on 101 the entire time. I looked at my odometer. I'd driven 83 miles since leaving Portland. According to my usual route knowledge, I should have been much further south. The numbers didn't match. Nothing matched. I got out of the cab, needing to move, needing to feel something solid and real. The viewing platform was about 30 feet from where I'd parked. I walked to it, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The platform overlooked what should have been the ocean. But when I reached the railing and looked out, I saw something else. A vast, empty space, too dark to be water, too still to be sky. It felt like looking over the edge of the world into nothing. I stepped back from the railing, my stomach twisting. I shined my flashlight down into the void. The beam seemed to extend forever without hitting anything, just disappearing into darkness. I heard something behind me. Footsteps on pavement, slow and deliberate. I spun around, my light sweeping across the rest area. There was nothing there. Just Betty, her engine idling, her lights cutting cones through the darkness. The picnic table, empty. The road empty. But I'd heard footsteps. I was certain of it. I walked quickly back to the truck, my light sweeping back and forth, checking every shadow. I climbed into the cab and locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I put Betty in gear. That's when I saw it. On the picnic table, something that hadn't been there before. A piece of paper held down by a rock. I should have left it. I should have driven away immediately. But I couldn't. I needed to know. I got back out, walked to the table, picked up the paper. It was a map, hand-drawn in black ink on what looked like old parchment. It showed the coastline, but distorted, stretched in some places and compressed in others. A line ran through it, labeled Highway 1A in careful script. The line didn't reconnect to Highway 101. Instead, it continued south, past the California border, past any landmark I recognized, eventually running off the edge of the map into unmarked territory. And at the bottom, in the same careful script, all shortcuts have a price. You chose speed over certainty. Now you pay the toll. I crumpled the map and threw it back on the table. This was insane. Someone was messing with me, playing some elaborate prank. But who? I hadn't seen another person in hours. Hadn't seen another vehicle except for those abandoned ones. I got back in Betty and peeled out of the rest area, tires squealing on the pavement. I needed to get back to civilization, back to somewhere with people and lights and phone signals. I needed to prove to myself that the normal world still existed. The road descended sharply. I rode the brakes hard, feeling them heat up. The curves came faster, tighter, requiring my full concentration. I couldn't think about maps or messages or figures in the road. I could only focus on not losing control, on keeping Betty on the pavement. At the bottom of the descent, the road straightened out. And there, in my headlights, was a sign I recognized. A real sign. A familiar sign. California State Line, 2 miles. Relief washed over me. California. I knew California. Once I crossed that border, I'd be on familiar ground. I'd be somewhere that made sense. I accelerated, pushing Betty faster than was safe. 2 miles. Just 2 more miles. The miles passed. The border appeared, marked by a simple sign. Welcome to California. I crossed it doing 60, and I felt something change. The air felt different, lighter somehow. The darkness seemed less absolute. I checked my GPS. It still showed me on Highway 101, now in California, heading toward the coast. The ocean should be appearing on my right any moment now. Real ocean, real coastline, not that void I'd seen from the viewing platform. 5 miles into California, I saw lights ahead. A town, lit up against the darkness. I nearly cried with relief. Civilization, people, a place to stop and reset. The town was called Crescent Bay, population 2,400 according to the sign. I'd never heard of it, but I didn't care. It was real. It had streetlights and businesses and cars parked along the main street. I pulled into a gas station, parking next to the pumps. I sat there for a moment, just breathing, letting my heart rate return to normal. I was safe. I'd made it through whatever that had been. I got out to pump gas and noticed the attendant watching me from inside the station. He was an older man, maybe 70, with white hair and a weathered face. When I walked to the door to pay, he looked at me strangely. "Where are you coming from?" he asked. "Portland," I said. "Took Highway 1A to save some time." His expression changed. Something between concern and pity crossed his face. "Highway 1A? Yeah, the shortcut that cuts inland. The GPS recommended it. He shook his head slowly. Son, there is no Highway 1A. Never has been. I just drove on it, I said, my voice rising. I drove on it for 45 miles. I saw the signs. What you saw and what's real might not be the same thing, he said. How long ago did you turn onto this Highway 1A? I checked my watch. It was 9:15 p.m. I'd left Portland around noon, call it 9 hours ago. But I'd only been on Highway 1A for maybe 2 hours. The math didn't work. I don't know, I admitted. A couple hours ago? He sighed. You might want to check your logbook, check your timestamps. Then you might want to think about whether you really want to keep driving south tonight. I didn't know what to say to that. I paid for my gas and walked back to Betty. I climbed into the cab and pulled out my logbook, the physical record I was required to keep of my driving hours. My last entry showed me leaving a rest stop near Coos Bay, Oregon. The timestamp was 2:47 p.m. 7 hours ago. I had no memory of stopping near Coos Bay, no memory of 7 hours passing. The last thing I remembered clearly was turning onto Highway 1A around 5:30 p.m. Where had those 3 hours gone? I sat in that gas station parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to make sense of the timestamps, trying to remember those missing hours. But my memory had a gap, a blank space where 3 hours should have been. The attendant was still watching me from inside the station. He looked worried, like he'd seen this before, like he knew what was happening to me. I started Betty's engine and pulled back onto the road. I needed to keep moving, needed to complete this delivery. I could figure out the rest later. I could figure out the lost time and the impossible highway and all of it later. Right now, I just needed to drive. The road was definitely Highway 101 now. I recognized landmarks, matched them to my memory. There was the overlook where I'd stopped once to watch whales. There was the turnoff to Prairie Creek Redwoods. Everything was where it should be, familiar and solid. But something felt off. The landmarks appeared in the wrong order. The overlook should have come before the Prairie Creek turnoff, not after. And the distances were wrong. Things that should have been miles apart were appearing within minutes of each other. I checked the GPS. It showed me making steady progress south, approaching Eureka. But when I looked at my odometer, the numbers weren't increasing. Or they were increasing too slowly. Or they were jumping randomly. I couldn't trust my instruments anymore. Couldn't trust the GPS or the odometer or even my own watch. Time and distance had become fluid, unreliable. I tried my phone again. Still no signal. I tried the CB. Static, with occasional bursts of that same distorted voice I'd heard before. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was urgent, warning. I passed a semi going the opposite direction, northbound. I flashed my lights, hoping for some acknowledgement, some proof that other drivers existed on this road. The semi didn't respond. As it passed, I tried to see the driver, but the cab was dark, empty, or appeared empty. I was learning not to trust appearances. Mile marker 47 appeared in my headlights, then mile marker 62, then mile marker 39. The numbers made no sense, followed no pattern. I was moving through space, covering distance, but the distance wasn't being measured correctly. I saw the abandoned pickup again. The same orange Ford F-150 with the open driver's door and the interior light on. But I'd passed that hours ago, on Highway 1A. It shouldn't be here on Highway 101, unless I was back on Highway 1A, unless I'd never actually left it, unless that merge onto 101 had been an illusion, and I'd been driving in circles the whole time. I slowed down as I approached the pickup. In the driver's seat, I could see something now that I hadn't seen before. A logbook open on the bench seat. I stopped Betty and got out, my flashlight in hand. The logbook was old, water damaged, the pages yellowed and brittle, but I could still read the entries. They were from 1987, written in careful script. A driver named William Hayes running freight from Portland to San Francisco. His last entry was dated November 14, 1987. Turned onto Highway 1A to save time. GPS says it's faster. Something feels wrong, but I'm going to keep going. Only 20 miles to the reconnection point. That was the last entry. Whatever had happened to William Hayes after that, he hadn't written it down. Or hadn't been able to. I put the logbook back exactly where I'd found it and returned to Betty. My hands were shaking. November 14th, 1987. Almost 40 years ago. And the entry described exactly what I'd done. Turned onto Highway 1A, trusted the GPS, kept going despite the warning signs. How many drivers had made the same mistake? How many had turned onto that impossible road and never made it back? I had to try calling out on the CB again. I picked up the receiver, keyed the mic. "This is Unit 437. Is anyone out there? Can anyone hear me?" The static cleared. A voice came through, clearer than before. "We can hear you, 437. We're all out here. Who are you? Where are you? We're the ones who took the shortcut. We're the ones who chose speed over certainty. We're still driving, 437. Still trying to find the way back." "There has to be a way back," I said. "There has to be an exit." "Maybe there is," the voice said. "None of us have found it yet, but you're welcome to try." The static returned, drowning out the voice. I put down the receiver and kept driving. The road signs became increasingly surreal. Next exit, yesterday. Previous exit, tomorrow. Speed limit, yes. Warning signs with symbols I didn't recognize, shapes that hurt to look at. I passed the pile of clothes again, still arranged in the shape of a person. But now there were more piles. Dozens of them, lining both sides of the road. Each one carefully arranged. Each one marking where someone had stopped and given up. I wasn't going to stop. I wasn't going to give up. I was going to keep driving until I found the exit, until I found the way back to the real Highway 101. My fuel gauge hadn't moved in hours. Still showing 3/4 full despite the distance I'd covered. Infinite fuel for an infinite road. The thought should have been comforting, but it terrified me instead. I checked my watch, 9:15 p.m. The same time it had been at the gas station. The same time it had been for what felt like hours. Time had stopped, or I had stopped moving through time, or time itself had become meaningless on this road. Ahead, I saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. Tall, thin, the same one I'd seen at the split between Highway 1A and 101. As I got closer, I could see more details. It wasn't quite human. The proportions were wrong, the limbs too long, the body too narrow, but it was wearing clothes, human clothes, a jacket and jeans and boots, the clothes from one of those piles. It had taken on a form, a shape, using the garments left by drivers who'd given up. I slowed, but didn't stop. The figure didn't move as I approached. It just stood there, watching me with eyes that reflected my headlights like an animal's. As I passed it, it turned its head to follow my movement. I watched it in my mirror until the darkness swallowed it. More figures appeared, standing along the roadside, in the forest, on the pavement, all wearing human clothes, all shaped roughly like people, all wrong in ways I couldn't quite define. They watched me pass, silent and still. I was crying now, though I didn't remember starting. Tears ran down my face as I drove, my hands locked on the wheel, my foot steady on the accelerator. I couldn't stop. Stopping meant joining them, becoming another pile of clothes, another shape in the darkness. The road began to look familiar again. I recognized this section, knew it from my regular runs. The curve of the pavement, the shape of the trees, the way the road dipped and rose. I was back on the real Highway 101. I was sure of it. But then I'd been sure before, and I'd been wrong. I passed a sign. Santa Barbara, 437 miles. My unit number. The road knew my number, knew who I was. It was marking the distance specifically for me. The number was too high. I should have been closer to Santa Barbara, much closer. I'd been driving for hours, covering hundreds of miles, but the sign said I was further away than when I'd started. I was losing ground instead of gaining it, moving backward through space even as I drove forward. Or space itself was expanding ahead of me, stretching to keep my destination always out of reach. My CB crackled again. Multiple voices this time, overlapping, all saying the same thing. Turn back while you still can. But there was nowhere to turn back to. The road behind me was the same as the road ahead. An endless stretch of pavement through darkness, going nowhere, going everywhere, going in circles. I checked my GPS one more time. It showed me on Highway 101. Making steady progress south. The little blue dot moved along the line, approaching Santa Barbara. Estimated arrival time updating constantly. According to the GPS, everything was normal. According to the GPS, I'd be at my destination in 4 hours. But I'd been 4 hours away for the last 4 hours. The estimated time never changed, never got closer. I was trapped in a moment. A single point in time stretched to infinity. I saw my own taillights ahead of me. Betty's distinctive pattern, the way one light was slightly dimmer than the other. I was following myself, caught in a loop, driving in a circle that felt like a straight line. I should have been terrified, should have been screaming or crying or breaking down. But I felt nothing, just a kind of numb acceptance. This was my reality now. This road, this darkness, this endless driving toward a destination I'd never reach. I thought about Rita Holloway, the dispatcher who'd warned me about the storm. She'd told me to be careful, told me the load wasn't worth my life. She'd been right. I should have taken I-5. Should have ignored the GPS when it showed me Highway 1A. Should have trusted my instincts instead of my technology. But I hadn't. And now I was here, wherever here was. Driving through darkness on a road that didn't exist, following signs that made no sense, passing landmarks that repeated and shifted and refused to stay in one place. The figures along the road were multiplying, hundreds of them now, maybe thousands, all wearing the clothes of drivers who'd come before me, all watching as I passed, all waiting for me to join them. I won't stop. That's the decision I've made. As long as I keep moving, I'm still alive, still driving, still me. The moment I stop, I become one of them. Another shape in the darkness, another warning to the next driver who makes the same mistake I did. So I drive. Through the endless night, following the white line, watching the mile markers jump and shift, listening to the voices on the CB warning me of things I can't change. My fuel gauge shows 3/4 full. My watch shows 9:15 p.m. My GPS shows me 4 hours from Santa Barbara. All of these things have been true for longer than I can measure. All of them will be true forever. The road ahead looks the same as the road behind. The darkness is absolute, broken only by my headlights and the occasional flash of reflective signs. I don't know if I'm moving forward or backward or standing still. I don't know if I'm alive or dead or something in between. I only know that I'm driving, and I'll keep driving. Because stopping means accepting the truth I'm not ready to face. That some roads don't have destinations. Some shortcuts don't save time, Some decisions can't be undone. The GPS continues to promise that Santa Barbara is ahead, just 4 hours away. Just 4 hours of driving and I'll reach my destination. Unload my cargo, complete my run. But I've been driving for longer than 4 hours. Longer than I can remember. And Santa Barbara stays exactly 4 hours away, always ahead, always unreachable. I pass my own taillights again. The loop is getting shorter, or I'm getting faster, or the road is contracting. Soon, I'll be so close to myself that I'll be able to see my own face in the rearview mirror. Soon, I'll catch up to the moment when I first turned onto Highway 1A, and maybe then the loop will break, or maybe it will just start over. The last entry in my logbook, the one I wrote before the timestamp stopped making sense, says, "Turned onto Highway 1A to save time." Something feels wrong, but I'm going to keep going. Only 20 miles to the reconnection point. The same words William Hayes wrote in 1987. The same words probably written by dozens or hundreds of drivers before him. The same words that will be written by whoever comes after me. Because there will be someone after me. Someone else will get the suggestion from their GPS, will see that Highway 1A can save 47 minutes, will make the same choice I made. And they'll end up here, on this road, driving this loop, watching their fuel gauge stay fixed and their watch hands refuse to move. Maybe they'll see me, another dark shape among the trees, wearing my jacket and jeans and boots, watching as they pass. Maybe they'll recognize the warning for what it is. Maybe they'll turn back before it's too late. Or maybe they'll keep driving, just like I'm doing now. Just like I'll keep doing forever. Because stopping isn't an option. Giving up isn't an option. The only option is to keep moving forward, even if forward has lost all meaning. The road stretches ahead of me, perfectly straight in my headlights, endlessly curving in my memory. The white line guides me on, faithful and constant, leading me nowhere and everywhere at once. I'm still on Highway 1A. I'll always be on Highway 1A. And the terrible thing is, I'm starting to forget what anything else felt like. The memory of Highway 101, of Portland, of Santa Barbara, they're all fading, becoming abstract concepts rather than real places. Soon, this road will be all I know. This darkness, this driving, this endless moment stretched to infinity. And maybe that's the real toll. Not death, but forgetting. Not stopping, but never arriving. Not turning back, but never moving forward. The GPS updates. Santa Barbara, 437 miles. Estimated time, 4 hours. I check my watch, 9:15 p.m. I check my fuel, 3/4 full. I keep driving. My name is Cole Garrett, and I've been hauling freight for 12 years now. Started when I was 26, after spending 3 years working construction in Seattle. The work was good, the money was decent, but I couldn't stand being in one place every day. I needed movement, needed to see different landscapes, needed the freedom that comes with the open road. Trucking gave me that. Every day was different. Every route had its own character, and I answered to no one except the dispatcher and the Department of Transportation. I work for a company called Western Haul Logistics, based out of Tacoma. We're a small outfit, maybe 15 drivers total, specializing in overnight runs along the Pacific coast. The hours are brutal. Most of my driving happens between midnight and dawn, but the pay compensates for it. Night differential, hazard pay for weather conditions, and bonuses for on-time delivery. I clear about $70,000 a year, which is enough to keep my apartment, my truck payments, and my habits. My rig is a 2018 Freightliner Cascadia, silver with black trim. I call her Silver because I'm not creative with names. She's reliable, comfortable, and handles the coastal weather better than most trucks I've driven. The cab has a sleeper berth that I've customized with a decent mattress, blackout curtains, and a small refrigerator. On long hauls, it's more comfortable than some of the motels I've stayed in. This particular run started on a Thursday night in late November. I'd picked up a load of canned seafood in Astoria, Oregon, salmon and tuna, bound for a distributor in San Luis Obispo, California. The cargo was temperature-controlled but not frozen, which meant I had some flexibility in my route and timing. As long as I delivered within 48 hours, I was good. The dispatcher who handed me the paperwork was a guy named Marcus, a former driver who'd taken a desk job after a back injury, ended his road career. He looked at the weather forecast and grimaced. "Storm's moving in," he said. "Heavy rain, high winds. Might want to wait it out." I shook my head. "I've driven through worse. Besides, I want to get this done. I've got 3 days off after this run, and I'm not spending them sitting in a warehouse." Marcus shrugged. "Your call. Just be careful out there. And if you need to stop, stop. Don't be a hero." I signed the paperwork and headed out. It was just past midnight, cold and clear in Astoria. The temperature was in the low 40s, no rain yet, perfect conditions for night driving. I merged onto Highway 101 southbound and settled into the familiar rhythm of the road. The first hour was easy. Light traffic, good visibility, silver running smooth. I passed through small coastal towns, their streetlights creating small pools of light in the darkness. Most places were asleep, just the occasional gas station or all-night diner showing signs of life. This was my favorite time to drive. The world reduced to just me and the road, and the sound of the engine. Around 2 a.m. the rain started. Light at first, just a drizzle that barely required wipers. But within 20 minutes it had intensified to a heavy downpour, the kind that turns the windshield into a waterfall between wiper swipes. I slowed down, dropped from 60 to 50, then to 45. Visibility dropped to maybe 100 feet. Other vehicles became scarce. Most drivers with any sense had pulled over to wait it out. But I kept going. I had a schedule to keep, and I'd driven through worse weather than this. The key was to stay focused, maintain a safe speed, and keep your distance from other vehicles. Basic defensive driving, the kind they teach you in trucking school, but most drivers forget once they've been on the road a few years. By 3 a.m., I was somewhere south of Coos Bay, in that long stretch of highway that hugs the coastline with nothing but forest on one side and ocean on the other. The rain was relentless, and the wind had picked up, buffeting Silver hard enough that I had to fight to keep her in her lane. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. That's when I saw the sign. It appeared suddenly in my headlights, a green reflective rectangle on the right side of the road. Last services before water. 2 miles, exit 47B. I frowned. I'd driven this section of 101 dozens of times, and I'd never seen that sign before. Last services before water didn't make sense. The ocean was right there, had been for the last 100 miles. And exit 47B. The exits on Highway 101 weren't numbered in Oregon, at least not in this section. But I was tired. My bladder was full, and the idea of stopping for coffee and a bathroom break was appealing. If there was a service area ahead, even one I didn't remember, I'd take it. I could stretch my legs, check the cargo, maybe call Marcus and let him know I was making good time despite the weather. 2 miles later, the exit appeared. A standard off-ramp, well-maintained, curving away from the highway into darkness. The sign at the base of the ramp read, "Coastal Services, Truck Parking Available, 24 hours." I put on my turn signal and took the exit. The ramp descended slightly, winding through dense forest. The pavement was wet but solid, no potholes or rough patches. My headlights picked out reflective markers along the edge, guiding me down. After about a quarter-mile, the trees opened up and I saw the service area. It was larger than I'd expected. A good-sized parking lot with spaces for maybe 20 trucks, though only a few were occupied. A single-story building sat at the far end, lights on in some windows, creating a warm glow against the darkness. A fuel island with 4 pumps stood near the entrance. Everything looked normal, legitimate, exactly like hundreds of other truck stops I'd visited. I pulled into an empty parking space near the building and killed the engine. The silence that followed was profound, just the sound of rain drumming on Silver's roof and the occasional gust of wind. I sat there for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness beyond my windshield. The other trucks in the lot were dark, no lights in their cabs. Drivers sleeping, probably, or maybe inside the building getting food. I checked my watch, 3:27 a.m. Late enough that most drivers would be catching what sleep they could before the morning rush. I grabbed my rain jacket from behind the seat and stepped out into the weather. The cold hit me immediately, colder than it should have been for late November on the coast. My breath came out in visible puffs. The rain was icy, almost sleet, stinging where it hit my face. I jogged toward the building, my boots splashing through puddles. Up close, I could see more details. The building was old, maybe from the 70s or 80s, but well-maintained. White paint, green trim, large windows that showed the interior. Through the glass, I could see a convenience store layout. Aisles of snacks and drinks, a coffee station, a checkout counter. But I didn't see anyone inside. I tried the door. It was unlocked, swinging open easily. A bell chimed as I entered, the sound jarring in the silence. I stood in the doorway, water dripping from my jacket, looking around. The interior was clean, well lit, and completely empty. No clerk behind the counter, no other customers, no signs of anyone at all. The coffee station had fresh pots brewing, steam rising from the carafes. The refrigerators hummed along the far wall. The lights buzzed overhead with that particular frequency that makes your teeth ache if you listen too long. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded flat, absorbed by the space. "Anyone here?" No response. I walked further into the store, my boots squeaking on the linoleum floor. Everything looked normal, products neatly arranged on shelves, prices clearly marked. A small section of trucking supplies near the back. There was even a display of local maps and tourist brochures near the counter. But there was something off about the place. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The products were recognizable brands, but the packaging looked slightly wrong. Old-fashioned, like they were from a decade or two ago. The coffee station had paper cups with a logo I didn't recognize. The cash register was an old mechanical model, not the modern computerized systems every store used now. I walked to the coffee station and poured myself a cup. The coffee smelled fresh, normal. I took a sip. It tasted fine, maybe a bit bitter, but that was standard for truck stop coffee. I grabbed a lid and a stir, then walked to the counter. "Hello?" I called again. "I need to pay for this." Still no response. I stood there for a moment, holding my coffee, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. This wasn't right. Truck stops were required to have staff on duty 24/7. You couldn't just leave a place unlocked and unattended, not with merchandise and fuel pumps and liability issues. I noticed a logbook on the counter, the kind drivers use to record their hours. I flipped it open, curious about who else had stopped here recently. The entries were in different handwriting, different dates, but they all said essentially the same thing. Stopped for fuel and coffee, strange place, couldn't find the attendant. Where is everyone? Store looks open, but nobody's here. Coffee's good, but something feels wrong. Leaving now. The dates on the entries were scattered across years. Some from last month, some from 2 years ago, one from 1993, all describing the same experience I was having: an open truck stop with no staff, an unsettling atmosphere, a desire to leave quickly. I closed the logbook and looked around more carefully. Now that I was paying attention, I noticed other oddities. The clock on the wall showed 3:30 a.m., but the second hand wasn't moving. The refrigerators were humming, but the temperature gauge on one of them read 87 degrees. A newspaper in the rack near the door was dated November 23, 2009, 16 years ago, but it looked fresh, no yellowing or decay. I heard a sound from somewhere in the back of the building. Not a voice, not footsteps, but something else, a low thrumming, like machinery running, but with a rhythm that was almost organic. It rose and fell, steady and persistent, coming from behind a door marked "Employees Only." I should have left then. Should have put down my coffee, walked out the door, gotten back in silver, and driven away. Every instinct I had was telling me to go. But curiosity is a powerful thing, and I wanted to understand what was happening here. I walked to the employee door and tried the handle. It was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, revealing a short hallway lit by flickering fluorescent lights. 3 doors led off the hallway. 2 marked as restrooms, 1 marked office. The thrumming was louder here, coming from the office. I walked toward it, my hand reaching for the doorknob. Before I could turn it, I heard another sound. This one from outside, from the parking lot. The unmistakable diesel rumble of a truck engine starting up. I turned and walked quickly back through the store. Through the windows, I could see one of the other trucks, a dark green Peterbilt that had been parked near mine, pulling out of its space. Its headlights swept across the lot as it turned, illuminating silver for a moment. Then it headed toward the exit ramp. I watched it go, then looked at the other trucks still parked in the lot. 4 of them, all dark and all silent. Had they been there when I arrived? I tried to remember, but I couldn't picture the lot clearly in my mind. My memory of pulling in was fuzzy, indistinct. I walked outside, back into the rain and cold. I needed to check on Silver, needed to make sure the cargo was secure. The parking lot felt larger now, the spaces between trucks stretching further than they should. I walked toward Silver, my boots splashing through puddles that reflected the building's lights in strange, distorted patterns. As I passed one of the other trucks, a red Kenworth with an unmarked trailer, I glanced up at the cab. A figure sat in the driver's seat, completely still, staring straight ahead. I stopped, my heart rate jumping. "Hey," I called out. "You okay?" The figure didn't move, didn't turn toward me, didn't acknowledge my presence. Just sat there, hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, staring forward. I took a step closer, peering up at the cab. In the dim light from the building, I could make out more details. The figure was wearing a jacket, had short hair, seemed male. But something about the posture was wrong. Too rigid, too still, like a mannequin placed in the seat. I reached up and knocked on the door. "Hey, can you hear me?" Still no response. The figure remained frozen, unmoving. I backed away, my skin crawling. This was wrong. Everything about this place was wrong. I needed to leave, needed to get back on the highway, needed to put distance between myself and this truck stop. I ran to Silver and climbed into the cab. I locked the doors, started the engine, and put her in gear. As I pulled out of the parking space, I looked back at the building. Through the windows, I could see the interior, still bright and empty. The coffee station still had steam rising from the carafes. The lights still buzzed overhead. And standing in the doorway, watching me leave, was a figure. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like an attendant's uniform. It raised one hand in a slow wave, and even from this distance I could see that something about its proportions was wrong. The arm too long, the fingers too many, the gesture too smooth. I didn't wave back. I just drove, up the exit ramp, back onto Highway 101, back into the rain and darkness and the familiar world of the highway. I looked at my watch. It showed 3:33 a.m. I'd been at the truck stop for maybe 10 minutes, 15 at most. But it felt like longer. It felt like hours had passed in that empty building, in that strange parking lot with its silent trucks and frozen drivers. I checked my fuel gauge, still 3/4 full, same as when I'd arrived. I hadn't gotten gas, hadn't even paid for the coffee I'd taken. I realized I was still holding the cup, balanced in the cup holder. I picked it up and took a sip. It was ice cold, as if it had been sitting there for hours. I threw it out the window and kept driving. The rain continued for another hour, heavy and relentless. I drove in silence, my radio turned off, trying to process what I'd just experienced. A truck stop that shouldn't exist, with products from different decades and no staff. A logbook full of entries from drivers who'd had the same experience. A figure in the doorway with 2 long arms. None of it made sense. But it had been real. I'd been there, walked through that building, seen those things. I had the empty coffee cup as proof, though what it proved I couldn't say. Around 5 a.m., the rain finally stopped. The clouds began to break up, revealing patches of stars. Dawn was still an hour away, but the darkness felt less absolute now, less oppressive. I allowed myself to relax slightly, my grip on the steering wheel loosening. I needed to stop again, properly this time. I needed to check the cargo, use a bathroom, maybe grab some real food, and I needed to call Marcus, tell him about the truck stop, see if he knew anything about it. I pulled into a legitimate rest area near Reedsport, one I'd stopped at many times before. It was small but well lit, with actual people. A few cars in the lot, a couple walking their dog. Normal activity for a highway rest stop. I parked Silver and sat there for a moment, just soaking in the normalcy of it all. I checked my phone. No signal, which wasn't unusual in this area. I walked to the rest area building, used the bathroom, and bought a sandwich from a vending machine. An actual vending machine with actual food that took actual money. The simple transaction felt profound after the strangeness of the truck stop. As I walked back to Silver, I noticed something. The coffee cup I'd thrown out earlier was sitting on my dashboard. I'd tossed it out the window miles back, I was certain of it. But here it was, back in my truck, as if it had never left. I picked it up, examining it. The logo on the side showed a lighthouse with text beneath it. Coastal Services, last stop before the water. The paper was slightly damp, as if recently filled. I lifted the lid. Inside was coffee, still hot, steam rising from the surface. I threw the cup out the window again, watching it tumble away into the darkness. Then I climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and sat there, breathing hard. This wasn't over. Whatever had happened at that truck stop, it wasn't finished with me yet. I started Silver's engine and pulled back onto the highway. I needed to keep moving, needed to complete this delivery, needed to get to California where things would make sense again. But as I drove, I started noticing things. Small things at first, easy to dismiss as fatigue or imagination. The mile markers appeared at irregular intervals, the numbers not quite sequential. Road signs showed distances that didn't match my odometer. The clock on my dashboard seemed to move slower than my watch, the two gradually falling out of sync. And every few miles I'd see signs for that truck stop. Exit 47B, Coastal Services, last stop before the water. Different exits, different locations, but always the same sign, always the same message. As if the truck stop was following me, appearing at regular intervals, offering me chance after chance to return. I ignored the signs and kept driving. By 6 a.m., full dawn had arrived. The sun rose over the coastal mountains behind me, painting the ocean gold and pink. Other vehicles appeared on the road, early morning commuters and commercial traffic. The world felt real again, solid and comprehensible. I stopped at a gas station in Coos Bay, a busy place with multiple pumps and a convenience store full of customers. I filled Silver's tank and bought coffee, real coffee from a real person at a real cash register. The normalcy of it all was almost overwhelming. As I was getting back in my truck, another driver approached me. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and a weathered face. He drove a blue Volvo VNL parked at the next pump. "You look like you've seen something," he said. I didn't know how to respond to that. "What do you mean?" "That look in your eyes. I've seen it before. You stopped somewhere you shouldn't have, didn't you? Somewhere that felt wrong?" I nodded slowly. "A truck stop. Exit 47B. Said it was the last services before water. But there was no one there, and the place felt off." His expression darkened. "Coastal Services. Yeah, you know it." "I know of it. Most of us old-timers do. It's been around for decades, but it's not always there. Sometimes you see the exit, sometimes you don't. And if you do see it, if you stop there..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "What happens?" "Different things for different people. Some drivers report losing time, showing up at their destination hours late with no memory of where they've been. Some say they start seeing the exit everywhere, like it's following them. And some..." He paused. "Some never make it to their destination at all." I felt cold despite the morning sun. What is it? What's happening there? Nobody knows for sure. Some say it's a ghost town, a place that got flooded years ago and now exists somewhere between here and there. Others think it's something older, something that was there before the highway, before any of this. He gestured at the gas station, the cars, the modern world around us. "Whatever it is, my advice is to stay away. Don't take that exit again, no matter how tired you are, no matter how much you need to stop. Find somewhere else." "I wasn't planning on going back," I said. "Good. But sometimes it's not about what you plan. Sometimes the road decides for you." He looked at me seriously. "If you see that exit again, if you feel yourself being drawn to it, fight it. Keep driving. Eventually you'll get far enough south that it can't reach you anymore." "How far south?" "California border, usually. Once you cross into California, you should be safe. Until then, stay alert. And don't drive alone at night if you can help it." He walked back to his truck, leaving me standing there with my half-full coffee cup and a head full of questions. I wanted to ask more, wanted to understand what I'd stumbled into. But he'd already climbed into his Volvo and was pulling out of the station. I got back in Silver and sat there, thinking. The logical part of my brain said this was all nonsense, that I'd just had a strange experience at a poorly managed truck stop and was now being fed ghost stories by a superstitious old driver. But the rest of me, the part that had walked through that empty building and seen that figure with 2 long arms, knew better. I pulled out my phone and tried calling Marcus. Still no signal. I'd have to wait until I got further south, until I was in better coverage area. I needed to tell him about this, needed to report the truck stop so other drivers could be warned. I merged back onto Highway 101 and continued south. The morning was beautiful, clear and bright. The ocean sparkling in the sunlight. Traffic was picking up as people headed to work. Everything felt normal, real, safe. But I kept seeing the signs. Exit 47B, Coastal Services, 2 miles. Different exits, different locations, but always the same message. They appeared every 20 miles or so, regular as clockwork. And each time I saw one, I felt a pull, a subtle urge to take the exit, to return to that truck stop. It would be so easy. Just turn the wheel, follow the ramp down, pull into that parking lot. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and kept driving straight. By mid-morning, I'd crossed into California. The landscape changed subtly. The trees became more sparse, the coastline more rugged. I stopped at a visitor center just past the border and tried my phone again. This time I had signal, 3 bars. I called Marcus. "Cole, where are you? I've been trying to reach you." "Just crossed into California." "Why, what's wrong?" "Your truck's GPS has been acting weird, showing you going off route, stopping in places that don't exist. I thought maybe you'd broken down or something." My stomach tightened. "What places?" "Exit 47B, somewhere in Oregon. The GPS showed you stopped there for hours, but when I tried to call, you didn't answer. Then it showed you back on the highway like nothing happened. I was about to send someone to look for you." "I stopped there," I admitted. "But only for maybe 10 minutes, 15 at most." "Cole, according to the GPS, you were there for almost 4 hours, from 3:30 to 7:15 a.m. I looked at my watch. It showed 10:47 a.m. That meant I'd left the truck stop 7 hours ago. But it didn't feel like 7 hours. It felt like 3, maybe 4 at most. Where had the extra time gone? "Marcus, listen to me. There's something wrong with that truck stop. I don't know what, but we need to warn the other drivers. Tell them not to take exit 47B, not to stop at Coastal Services. It's not safe." There was a long pause on the other end. "Cole, there is no exit 47B in Oregon. I'm looking at the map right now. Exits aren't even numbered in that section of 101. I saw the sign. I took the exit. I was there. I believe you saw something, but it wasn't a real place. At least, not a place that's on any map or in any database. The GPS just showed you as a dot in the middle of nowhere, not moving, for 4 hours." I didn't know what to say to that. How do you explain experiencing something that apparently doesn't exist? "Just get to your destination," Marcus said finally. "Deliver the cargo, check into a motel, get some sleep. We'll talk more when you get back to Tacoma." "Yeah, okay." I hung up and sat there in the visitor center parking lot, watching tourists take pictures of the coastline. Normal people doing normal things, unaware of the impossibilities that existed just off the highway, waiting for drivers like me to stumble into them. I started Silver's engine and pulled back onto the highway. I had a delivery to make in San Luis Obispo, and I was going to complete it. Whatever had happened at that truck stop, whatever time I'd lost there, I was moving forward. I was staying on the main highway, following the route I knew, not taking any mysterious exits. But as I drove south through California, I kept checking my mirrors. And more than once, I thought I saw a dark green Peterbilt behind me, the same one I'd seen leaving the truck stop. It would appear in the distance, hold position for a few miles, then disappear when I looked again. And the coffee cup kept coming back. I'd throw it out, watch it tumble away, and an hour later it would be sitting on my dashboard, still hot, still steaming, as if freshly poured. I made it to San Luis Obispo by early afternoon. The delivery went smoothly, backed into the loading dock, watched them unload the cargo, got my paperwork signed, everything normal, everything by the book. The warehouse manager didn't notice anything unusual about me, didn't ask why I looked exhausted and paranoid. He just checked the manifest, signed the forms, and sent me on my way. I should have checked into a motel then, should have followed Marcus's advice and gotten some sleep. But I wanted to get back on the road, wanted to put more distance between myself and that truck stop. The idea of staying still, of being alone in a motel room with my thoughts, was worse than the idea of driving exhausted. So I headed back north, planning to make it to Tacoma in one long push. It was stupid, dangerous, the kind of decision that gets drivers killed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to keep moving, that stopping meant giving that place a chance to catch up with me. I made good time through the afternoon, passing through Santa Barbara and Ventura, then cutting inland to catch Highway 5 north. The interstate was faster, straighter, less intimate than Highway 11. I told myself I was choosing efficiency, but really, I just didn't want to drive the coast again. Didn't want to risk seeing another sign for exit 47B. But as evening approached and darkness started to fall, I realized my mistake. Highway 5 was emptier at night, more isolated in its own way. Long stretches with nothing but farmland and the occasional truck stop, the kind of places where you could disappear and no one would notice for hours. Around 8 p.m., I needed to stop for fuel. I pulled into a large truck stop near Bakersfield, one of the major chains with dozens of pumps and a busy restaurant. Lots of light, lots of people, lots of witnesses. Safe. I filled Silver's tank and parked in the main lot to grab dinner. The restaurant was crowded, noisy with the chatter of drivers and families and travelers. I ordered a burger and coffee and sat in a booth near the window where I could see Silver. As I ate, I noticed other drivers watching me. Not obviously, not staring, but glancing my way with expressions I couldn't quite read. Recognition? Concern? Fear? I didn't know, and I didn't want to know. I finished my meal quickly and headed back to the truck. As I was walking across the parking lot, another driver approached me. Younger guy, maybe 30, driving a red Freightliner. "You're the one who stopped at Coastal Services," he said. It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" He pointed at my hand. I looked down. I was holding that coffee cup, the one from the truck stop, though I had no memory of picking it up. I must have grabbed it from the dashboard without thinking. "Everyone who stops there carries that cup for a while," he said. "It's like a mark, a way of identifying who's been touched by that place. How do I get rid of it?" "You don't. Not until it's finished with you." "What does that mean?" He looked uncomfortable. "Look, I don't know all the details. I've never stopped there myself. But I know drivers who have, and I know what happens to them. The place follows you for a while, tries to draw you back. You'll see signs for it, feel pulls to exit the highway, and that cup will keep appearing no matter how many times you throw it away. For how long? Until you make a choice. What choice? To go back or to let it go? Most drivers eventually give in, take the exit again. They say it's easier the second time, less frightening. The place reveals more of itself to those who return willingly. And if I don't go back? Then eventually it stops. The signs disappear, the cup stays gone, the pull fades. But you have to be strong, have to resist the temptation. Because that place wants you back, and it's patient. He walked away before I could ask more questions, leaving me standing there with the cup in my hand. I looked at it, at the lighthouse logo and the text beneath. Last stop before the water. I threw the cup in a nearby trash can and climbed into Silver. I needed to get back on the road, needed to keep moving north. I had maybe 8 hours of driving ahead of me, and I was already exhausted. But stopping felt dangerous, and staying in one place felt impossible. I merged back onto Highway 5 and pushed Silver hard, faster than I should have been going. 70 miles per hour, then 75, eating up the miles. Other trucks fell behind and the landscape blurred past my windows. Around 10 p.m. I started seeing the signs again. Exit 47B, Coastal Services, 2 miles. But these exits weren't on Highway 101 anymore. They were here, on Highway 5, in the middle of the Central Valley, where there was no coast, no water, nothing but flat farmland stretching to the horizon. The exits appeared regularly, every 20 miles or so, each one promising that same truck stop. And I wanted to take them. That was the terrifying part. Despite everything I knew, despite the warnings, despite the strangeness and the fear, part of me wanted to exit the highway, wanted to see that truck stop again. It pulled at me like a magnet, like gravity, like something I couldn't resist. I turned on my CB radio, desperate for human contact, for voices that would anchor me to reality. But all I got was static, and underneath it, that sound. The thrumming. The same low, rhythmic pulse I'd heard coming from the office at the truck stop. It filled the cab, vibrating in my chest, matching the beat of my heart. I turned the CB off, but the sound continued. It wasn't coming from the radio, it was coming from everywhere and nowhere, a frequency I felt rather than heard. I passed another sign, Exit 47B, Coastal Services, 1 mile. My hands turned the wheel before I could stop them. Silver moved into the right lane, drifting toward the exit. I could see the off-ramp ahead, see the familiar curve, see the darkness beyond. No, I said aloud. I jerked the wheel back, forcing Silver into the left lane. A horn blared behind me as I cut off another truck. I didn't care. I needed to stay on the highway, needed to resist the pull, but it was getting stronger. Each sign made it worse, made the urge more powerful. I could feel that place calling to me, promising rest, promising answers, promising an end to the fear and confusion. The coffee cup was back on the dashboard, still hot, still steaming. I grabbed it and threw it out the window, watched it tumble away in my side mirror, hit the pavement, roll to a stop on the shoulder. 5 minutes later, it was back. I tried throwing it out again. Same result. It would disappear, then reappear, always in the same spot on the dashboard, always hot, always ready. "What do you want?" I shouted at it. "What do you want from me?" No answer. Just the cup, sitting there, the lighthouse logo mocking me. I passed Fresno, then Modesto, then Stockton. Each city was a blur of lights, a brief moment of civilization before the darkness returned. And at each city, I saw signs for Exit 47B, saw that impossible truck stop being offered to me over and over. By midnight, I was approaching Sacramento. I'd been driving for almost 20 hours straight, and I was hitting the wall. My eyes were burning, my reactions slowing. I needed to stop, needed to sleep, or I was going to crash. But I was terrified of stopping, terrified that if I pulled over, I'd wake up to find myself in that parking lot, surrounded by those silent trucks, with that figure in the doorway watching me. I took the Sacramento exit and found a large, well-lit truck stop, a national chain, modern and busy even at midnight. I parked in the most visible spot I could find, right under a light pole, surrounded by other trucks. Safety in numbers, I told myself. I set my alarm for 2 hours and tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that truck stop. The empty aisles, the coffee station with its steaming pots, the figure in the doorway, and I could hear that thrumming, steady and patient, waiting for me to return. I gave up on sleep after an hour. I was too wired, too frightened. I started Silver's engine and pulled back onto the highway. Better to drive exhausted than to sit still and let that place find me. The last stretch to Tacoma was a nightmare of fatigue and paranoia. I saw Exit 47B at every interchange, saw that lighthouse logo on every sign. The coffee cup multiplied, one on the dashboard, one in the cup holder, one in the passenger seat. All hot, all steaming, all impossible. I drove through the rest of the night and into dawn, not stopping, not slowing. When I finally crossed into Washington and saw the Tacoma skyline ahead, I nearly cried with relief. I'd made it. I was home. I pulled into the Western Hall Logistics Depot and parked Silver in her usual spot. I sat there for a long moment, my hands shaking, my vision blurred with exhaustion. Then I climbed out and walked to the office to file my delivery report. Marcus was there, looking concerned. "Cole, Jesus, you look terrible. What happened?" "I made the delivery. Everything's fine. You've been driving straight through. 24 hours, according to the GPS. That's not fine. That's dangerous. I just wanted to get back." He studied me carefully. "This is about that truck stop, isn't it? The place that doesn't exist?" I nodded. "Did you see it again? Did you stop there again?" "I saw the signs everywhere, but I didn't stop. I kept driving." "Good. That's good." He hesitated. "Look, take the rest of the week off, get some sleep, and maybe talk to someone. We have an employee assistance program, counselors who deal with stress and trauma. I'm fine. You're not fine, and that's okay. But you need to deal with this, whatever it is." I left the office and walked to my apartment. It was a short distance from the depot, a studio in a converted warehouse. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, then stopped. On my kitchen counter was a coffee cup, the Lighthouse logo. Still hot, still steaming. I didn't sleep that day. I tried, but every time I closed my eyes I was back at that truck stop. Walking through the empty aisles, approaching the office door, hearing that thrumming sound. So I stayed awake, drinking coffee from a different cup, watching TV without really seeing it, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. The apartment was quiet, normal. The coffee cup from the truck stop sat on my counter, cooling slowly, but it didn't multiply or move or do anything strange. It was just a cup, but as the hours passed, I started noticing other changes. Small things at first. The clock on my wall would skip minutes, jumping from 2:14 to 2:19 without the intervening time passing. My phone would ring, but when I answered, there was only that thrumming sound on the other end. The TV showed normal programming, but every commercial break featured the same advertisement. A lighthouse standing alone against a dark ocean, with text beneath it that read, "Find your way home." I tried calling my mother in Portland. She picked up on the third ring, her voice warm and familiar. But when I started to tell her about what had happened, her voice changed, became distorted, mechanical, and underneath her words I could hear that thrumming, that pulse that followed me everywhere now. I hung up quickly and turned off my phone. I couldn't trust it anymore, couldn't trust any of my devices, any of my connections to the outside world. They'd all been contaminated by that place, infected with whatever impossible logic governed the truck stop. That night, I tried going to a bar. I needed people around me, needed noise and light and normalcy. But everywhere I went, I saw that Lighthouse logo. On coasters, on napkins, on the TV screen showing advertisements. It was spreading, bleeding into my normal life, marking everything it touched. The bartender looked at me strangely when I ordered a beer. "You okay, buddy? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. He poured my beer, but kept watching me. "You a trucker?" "Yeah. How did you know?" "You've got that look. The one drivers get when they've been on the road too long, seen too much." My uncle was a trucker. He had that same look right before he disappeared. I set down my beer without drinking it. Disappeared? Yeah, took a run down to California, never came back. Police found his truck abandoned on the side of Highway 101, cargo still loaded, no sign of him. That was 15 years ago. He leaned closer, but sometimes, late at night, I still get calls from his cell phone. Nobody on the other end, just this weird humming sound. I left the bar and walked home through dark streets. As I passed an alley, I heard that sound. The thrumming, the pulse coming from the darkness. I stopped, my heart racing. In the alley, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure, tall, thin, watching me. I ran all the way back to my apartment and locked myself inside. I pushed furniture against the door, closed all the blinds, turned on every light, but I could still hear it, that steady pulse coming from somewhere inside the walls or inside my head. I sat on my couch, breathing hard, trying to think rationally. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen in the real world. There had to be an explanation. Stress, exhaustion, some kind of breakdown brought on by too many hours on the road. But the coffee cup on my counter suggested otherwise. It was still there, still real, still carrying that logo. And when I looked at it, really looked at it, I could see something moving inside. Not liquid, but something else. Shadows that swirled and coiled, forming shapes that almost looked like faces. I grabbed the cup and took it to the window. I was going to throw it out, watch it fall 7 stories to the street below, watch it shatter into pieces too small to reassemble. But when I opened the window and looked down, the street was gone. In its place was water. Dark, endless water that stretched to the horizon with waves that moved in that same rhythmic pulse. I slammed the window shut and backed away. This was impossible. My apartment was in downtown Tacoma, blocks from the water, high above street level. There was no way the ocean could be directly below my window, unless the ocean had come to me. Unless that truck stop, that impossible place, was reshaping reality to suit its own purposes. I spent the rest of the night awake, watching the cup, waiting for something else to happen. The thrumming grew louder as the hours passed, until it filled the apartment, vibrating through the floor and walls, and I started to hear voices underneath it. Whispers, too faint to make out words, but unmistakably human. The next morning, Marcus called. "Cole, we've got a problem. I need you to come to the depot." I walked there, exhausted and paranoid. The streets looked normal in daylight, the ocean back where it should be, the city solid and real around me. But I kept seeing that lighthouse logo. On billboards, on passing trucks, even tattooed on the arm of a homeless man sleeping in a doorway. Marcus met me in his office, his expression grim. 3 other drivers reported seeing that truck stop. Exit 47B Coastal Services. They all saw it within the last 24 hours. Where? Different places, one in Oregon, one in California, one in Washington, all on different highways. And they all said the same thing. They felt pulled to take the exit, but they resisted. "It's spreading," I said. "Whatever that place is, it's reaching further, affecting more drivers." Marcus nodded. "I've been doing research, talking to old-timers. There are stories about this truck stop going back decades. Some say it appeared after a real truck stop burned down in the 70s, killing everyone inside. Others say it's older, that it's always been there, just not always visible." He pulled out a folder and spread photographs across his desk. Old pictures, some in color, some in black and white. They showed truck stops, but there was something off about each one. A sign in the wrong place, a building with too many windows, a parking lot that seemed to stretch forever. "These are all from drivers who claim to have stopped at Coastal Services," Marcus said. "Different decades, different locations, but always the same basic elements. The empty store, the figure in the doorway, the sense of wrongness." I picked up one of the photos. It was dated 1967 and showed a truck stop that looked almost identical to the one I'd visited. The same white building with green trim, the same fuel pumps, even the same lighthouse logo on a sign near the entrance. How is this possible? I asked. How can the same place exist for 60 years without anyone shutting it down, without anyone investigating? Because it's not really there, Marcus said. At least, not in any way we understand. It exists in the spaces between places, appearing when certain conditions are met. And once you've been there, it leaves a mark on you, a connection. That's why you keep seeing the signs, why the cup keeps coming back. You're tied to it now. What do they say about the drivers who stop there? That depends. Some come back and are fine, shaken, but fine. They stop seeing the signs after a while, and they go back to their normal lives. Others can't shake it. They become obsessed, drive the highways looking for exit 47B, trying to find their way back. And some just disappear entirely. They take the exit one day and never return. He showed me another photograph. This one was recent, dated just 3 months ago. It showed a dark blue Freightliner parked at a truck stop, and standing next to it was a driver I recognized. Tom Bradford, one of our company's most experienced drivers. He'd gone missing on a run to Sacramento. His truck found abandoned with no explanation. Tom stopped there, Marcus said. I'm sure of it. The GPS showed him at exit 47B for 6 hours, then nothing. When they found his truck, it was empty. No cargo, no personal belongings, nothing except a single coffee cup on the dashboard, with that lighthouse logo. I felt sick. How many drivers has it taken? I don't know. Dozens, maybe. Over the years, there have been hundreds of unexplained disappearances along the West Coast highways. Not all of them are connected to coastal services, but some are. Enough to establish a pattern. Which category am I in? He looked at me seriously. I don't know yet, but I think it depends on what you do next. I'm not going back there. Maybe you don't have a choice. Maybe the only way to break free is to return, to face whatever's there and come to terms with it. Or maybe the only way to survive is to never go back. He didn't have an answer for that. Instead, he handed me another photograph. This one older than the rest. It showed a group of drivers standing in front of a truck stop, dated 1952. Their faces were grainy, hard to make out, but their expressions were clear enough. Fear, confusion, resignation. This was taken at a truck stop in Northern California, Marcus said. It burned down in 1953, killed 12 people. Fire investigators said it started in the office, but they could never determine the cause. The survivors, there were 3, all told the same story. They said the place wasn't real, that it existed somewhere else, and the fire was the only way to escape. You think they burned it deliberately? I think they tried to destroy something that couldn't be destroyed. Because 6 months later, reports started coming in about a new truck stop appearing on Highway 101. Same layout, same logo, same everything, as if the fire hadn't happened at all. I thought about the office at Coastal Services, about that thrumming sound coming from behind the door. What was in there? What was generating that pulse, that rhythm that seemed to underpin everything about that place? I need to know what's in that office, I said. I need to understand what's happening. Marcus shook his head. No, you don't. Trust me. The drivers who went looking for answers, who tried to investigate too deeply, they're the ones who never came back. But I couldn't let it go. The not knowing was eating at me, consuming my thoughts. I needed answers, needed to understand the rules of this impossible place so I could find a way to break free. I went back to my apartment and tried to sleep again. This time, exhaustion finally overcame fear, and I drifted off. But my dreams were full of that truck stop, that parking lot, those silent trucks, and the figure in the doorway. In the dream, I walked through the store again, But this time I could see more details. The products on the shelves weren't just old. They were from impossible times. Candy bars with wrappers advertising prices from the 1960s sitting next to energy drinks with designs from the future. Newspapers with dates that hadn't happened yet, describing events I didn't recognize. Maps showing coastlines that had changed, cities in different locations, roads that had never been built. The coffee station in my dream had hundreds of pots, all brewing simultaneously, all producing that same dark liquid that never cooled. And when I looked into one of the carafes, I saw faces in the coffee. Drivers, dozens of them, suspended in the liquid, their eyes open, their mouths moving but no sound coming out. I walked to the office door and opened it. Behind it wasn't the hallway I'd seen before, but a vast space that seemed to extend forever. The thrumming was deafening here, coming from everywhere at once, and in the distance I could see something massive, something that pulsed in rhythm with the sound. A shape too large to comprehend, too strange to describe. It noticed me. I felt its attention shift, focus on me like a spotlight. And in that moment, I understood. The truck stop wasn't a place. It was a lure, a trap, an extension of something much larger that existed just outside normal reality. And every driver who stopped there was adding to it, feeding it, becoming part of it. I woke up screaming. It was dark outside, but I didn't know if it was the same night or if I'd slept through an entire day. My watch had stopped working, the hands frozen at 3:33. My phone was dead, wouldn't charge no matter how long I left it plugged in. When I walked to the kitchen to make dinner and stopped, the counter was covered in coffee cups. Dozens of them, all identical, all with that lighthouse logo. All hot, all steaming, as if freshly poured. I swept them onto the floor. They shattered, coffee spreading across the linoleum. But as I watched, they reassembled themselves, the broken pieces flowing back together, the spilled coffee returning to the cups. Within seconds, they were whole again, sitting on the counter as if nothing had happened. I tried again, smashing them with a hammer this time, grinding the pieces under my boots. But it made no difference that they always came back, always whole, always hot. "What do you want?" I screamed at them. "What do you want from me?" The lights flickered, the thrumming sound returned, louder now, filling the apartment. And in the corner of the room, barely visible in the shadows, a figure appeared. Tall, thin, with arms too long and proportions too wrong. It didn't speak, it just pointed toward the door. I understood then. It wanted me to leave, to get back on the highway to find exit 47B and return to that truck stop. It wouldn't stop until I did. The signs, the cups, the thrumming, the figures, they would keep escalating, keep pressing until I gave in. I tried to resist for 3 more days. 3 days of barely sleeping, of seeing that logo everywhere, of hearing that thrumming sound in every quiet moment. The apartment became impossible to live in. Water from the faucets tasted like coffee. The TV showed only that lighthouse standing against the dark ocean. My neighbors started to avoid me, crossing to the other side of the hallway when they saw me coming. On the 3rd day, I found a photograph slipped under my door. It showed me standing in the parking lot of Coastal Services, surrounded by those silent trucks. But I didn't remember anyone taking the picture. In the background, I could see the office window, and through it, a mass of darkness that seemed to writhe and pulse. Written on the back of the photo, in handwriting I didn't recognize, "You can run, but you're already there. You've always been there. Come back and accept it." That's when I knew I had 2 choices: resist and slowly lose my mind, or return and face whatever waited for me there. I chose to return. I got dressed, walked to the depot, and climbed into Silver. Marcus saw me and came running out. "Cole, where are you going?" "Back to that truck stop. It's the only way to end this." "You don't have to do this. We can get you help. Find someone who understands what's happening." "There is no help, not for this. I have to go back." He grabbed my arm. "At least let me come with you. You shouldn't face this alone." I shook my head. "It wants me specifically. If you come, it might take you too. I can't risk that." "Then take this." He handed me a small device, like a GPS tracker. "It'll transmit your location. If something happens, at least we'll know where to start looking." I took it, knowing it probably wouldn't work once I crossed whatever boundary separated the normal world from that place. But it made Marcus feel better, so I clipped it to my belt. He didn't try to stop me. Maybe he understood, or maybe he just saw the determination in my eyes and knew it would be pointless. I drove south on Highway 5, retracing my route. It was late evening, the highway mostly empty. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that seemed too intense, too vivid. Everything looked slightly off, as if reality itself was beginning to warp around me. Within an hour, I saw the first sign. Exit 47B. Coastal Services. 2 miles. This time, I took it. The exit ramp was familiar, descending through dense forest, the pavement wet despite no rain. But as I drove down it, I noticed new details. The trees on either side weren't quite right. Their branches moved in ways that suggested they were reaching for the truck, and their trunks had patterns that almost looked like faces. The thrumming grew louder as I descended. I could feel it in my chest, in my bones, vibrating through the steering wheel. It was calling to me, welcoming me back, pulling me down into whatever reality existed at the bottom of this ramp. I followed it down, my headlights cutting through darkness until I reached the parking lot. It was exactly as I remembered, but also different. The building with its warm lights, the fuel pumps, the other trucks parked in silent rows. But this time there were more trucks. Dozens of them filling the lot, all dark and silent. And when I looked closely, I could see they were from different eras. Some were modern rigs, like silver. Others were older models from the 80s and 90s, and a few looked ancient, from the 50s and 60s. All of them empty, all of them waiting. I parked Silver in an empty space and sat there for a moment, gathering my courage. The tracker Marcus had given me was still on my belt, but when I looked at it, the display was blank. No signal, no GPS coordinates, nothing. I was truly alone now, cut off from the normal world. I stepped out into the cold. It was colder than before, cold enough that my breath came out in thick clouds. The parking lot stretched further than it should have. The trucks arranged in perfect rows that seemed to extend to infinity. And as I walked toward the building, I realized they weren't all trucks. Some were other vehicles, cars, vans, even a few motorcycles. All empty, all silent, all part of this collection. The figure was waiting in the doorway, the one I'd seen before, tall and thin, wearing an attendant's uniform. As I approached, it stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter. Up close, I could see its face more clearly, or rather, what should have been its face. The features were there, eyes, nose, mouth, but they were wrong. Too symmetrical, too perfect, like a mask rather than a real face. "Welcome back," it said. Its voice was layered, multiple tones speaking at once, creating a sound that made my teeth ache. "What are you?" I asked. "I'm the attendant. I help travelers find their way." "Find their way where?" "To where they need to be." It gestured toward the interior. "The others are waiting for you in the office. They have questions, as I'm sure you do." I walked into the building. It was empty, as before, but now I could see more details. The products on the shelves were constantly shifting, changing brands and packaging before my eyes. The coffee station had grown larger, with dozens of pots now, all producing that same dark liquid. And the floor wasn't solid. When I looked down, I could see through it to depths below, where shadows moved and coiled. I walked to the employee door and pushed it open. The hallway beyond was lit by those same flickering fluorescents, but the light didn't behave normally. It pooled in some areas and created absolute darkness in others, regardless of where the fixtures were mounted. I walked to the office door and turned the handle. Inside was a room much larger than should have fit in the building. It stretched back hundreds of feet, filled with filing cabinets and old desks and maps covering the walls. And in the center of the room, sitting at a long table, were the drivers. There must have been 30 of them now, maybe more. Men and women, young and old, wearing clothes from different decades. They all looked up as I entered, their expressions a mix of resignation and relief. "You came back," one of them said. The older man I'd spoken to before, maybe 70, with white hair and tired eyes. Most do, eventually. The pull becomes too strong to resist. I sat down at the table, feeling exhausted despite having just arrived. "What is this place, really?" He smiled sadly. That's the question we've all been asking. Some say it's a way station between life and death. Others think it's a pocket dimension, a space that exists parallel to our world but operates by different rules. A few believe it's something even stranger, a physical manifestation of the highway itself, the collective unconscious of every driver who's ever felt lost or alone on the road. How long have you been here? In linear time? I don't know. My last clear memory of the outside world is from 1987. I stopped here on a run from Seattle to San Diego, and I never left. But it doesn't feel like I've been here for 40 years. Sometimes it feels like days. Sometimes it feels like minutes. Time doesn't work the same way here. Another driver spoke up, a younger woman with short dark hair. "I came here in 2003, or maybe it was 2013. The memories get fuzzy after a while. But I remember the first time I saw the sign, the first time I took the exit. I thought I was just stopping for coffee. By the time I realized something was wrong, it was too late." "Too late how?" I asked. "Because by then, I'd drunk the coffee, walked through the store, spent time in this place. And once you do that, you're marked. You become part of it. Even if you leave, a piece of you stays behind. And eventually, that piece calls you back." I looked around the room at the other drivers. They all had the same look in their eyes, a mix of acceptance and despair. They'd given up hope of leaving, had accepted this strange limbo as their reality. "There has to be a way out," I said. "There has to be." The old man gestured to the maps on the wall. "We've been studying this place for years, decades, collectively. We've found patterns, rules, consistencies. But we haven't found an exit. Every road that leads away from here eventually loops back. Every door opens onto the same parking lot. It's a closed system, a maze with no solution." I stood up and walked to one of the maps. It showed the Pacific coast in incredible detail, but the geography was wrong. Mountains appeared where there should be valleys. Rivers flowed in impossible directions, and the coastline itself seemed to shift and change as I looked at it. But there was something else, something I hadn't noticed before. Marked at various points along the coast were small symbols, lighthouses, just like the one on the coffee cup logo. And connecting them were lines, roads that didn't appear on any official map, forming a network that covered the entire western seaboard. "What are these?" I asked, pointing to the lighthouse symbols. "Other locations," the old man said. "Other places like this one, scattered along the coast. We think they're all connected, all part of the same system. a network of impossible spaces that exist in the gaps between reality. How many are there? We've identified 17 so far, but there could be more. Each one serves as an anchor point, a place where the barrier between worlds is thin, and each one has its own attendant, its own collection of trapped travelers. Another driver, an older woman with gray hair, spoke up. We think the network is growing. New locations appear every few years, new lighthouse symbols on the map. It's expanding, reaching further, claiming more territory. Claiming it for what? What's the purpose of all this? No one had an answer for that. The room fell silent except for the thrumming, which was louder here than anywhere else. I could feel it in my chest, in my bones, syncing with my heartbeat. I need to see what's generating that sound, I said. I need to know what's at the center of all this. The old man shook his head. We've tried. There's a door at the back of this office that we think leads deeper into the structure, but it won't open for us. We've tried forcing it, picking the lock, even trying to break it down. Nothing works. Maybe it'll open for me. I'm new. Maybe the rules are different. Or maybe you'll end up like the others who tried too hard to understand. Maybe you'll disappear into the deeper parts of this place and never come back. But I had to try. I walked to the back of the room, past the filing cabinets and desks, until I found the door. It was plain, unmarked, made of dark wood that seemed to absorb light. The thrumming was coming from beyond it, so loud now that it drowned out all other sound. I reached for the handle. The moment my hand touched it, the thrumming stopped. Complete silence fell over the room, so sudden and absolute that it was painful. The door swung open. Beyond it was a corridor that descended into darkness. The walls weren't made of any material I recognized. They seemed to shift between solid and liquid, between matter and energy. And the air that came from the corridor was wrong. Too thick, too cold, carrying a smell like ozone and seawater and something else I couldn't identify. Don't go down there, the old man said. Please. We've lost people to that corridor. They walk in and they don't come back. But I was already moving forward, drawn by some compulsion I couldn't resist. The corridor called to me, promised answers, promised an end to the uncertainty. I stepped through the doorway and began to descend. The corridor descended for what felt like miles, though it couldn't have been more than a few hundred feet given the size of the building above. The walls around me pulsed with that familiar rhythm, and as I descended, I started to see things in them. Images, scenes, memories that weren't mine. I saw a driver from the 1960s stopping at this same truck stop, walking through the same empty store. I saw another from the 1980s sitting in the office upstairs, talking to the other trapped drivers. I saw dozens more, all making the same choice, all descending this same corridor, all seeking the same answers I was seeking now. The corridor opened into a vast chamber. It was circular, maybe 100 feet in diameter, with walls that seemed to be made of water or glass or something that shifted between states. And in the center of the chamber was the source of the thrumming. It wasn't a machine, though it had mechanical elements. It wasn't alive, though it pulsed like a beating heart. It was something in between, something that existed at the boundary between the organic and the artificial, the natural and the constructed. It looked like a lighthouse, but wrong. The structure spiraled upward in ways that defied geometry, its light pulsing in that same rhythmic pattern that had haunted me since my first visit. And surrounding it, embedded in the walls of the chamber, were thousands of objects. Coffee cups, all identical, all glowing faintly with that same light. Each cup represented a driver, I realized. Each one was a piece of someone who'd stopped here, a fragment of their essence captured and preserved. And mine was among them, I could feel it. Somewhere in that wall of cups was the one I'd been carrying, the one that kept returning no matter how many times I threw it away. A voice spoke, not from any particular direction, but from everywhere at once. It was the same layered voice I'd heard from the attendant, but deeper, more fundamental. You sought understanding. Here it is. What are you? I asked. I am the crossroads, the in-between, the space where journeys pause and transform. I have existed since the first road was built, since the first traveler set out from home wondering if they would return. I am doubt made manifest, uncertainty given form. Why do you trap drivers? I don't trap anyone. You trap yourselves. Every driver who stops here makes a choice to take the shortcut, to trust the GPS, to prioritize speed over caution. And in making that choice, you acknowledge that you're willing to compromise, to risk something for convenience. I simply make that risk tangible. What do you want from us? Want? I want nothing. I simply am. But you feed me nonetheless. Every moment of uncertainty, every flicker of doubt, every question about whether you made the right choice, these sustain me. You are not prisoners, you are participants, willing or not. I looked at the wall of cups, at the thousands of drivers who'd come before me. How do we leave? The same way you arrived, by making a choice. You chose to come here, chose to return, chose to descend into this chamber. Now choose to leave. It can't be that simple. Can't it? Or do you simply not believe it can be? That's always been the key, hasn't it? Belief, faith, trust. You stopped trusting your instincts when you saw that first sign for exit 47B. You chose to trust technology instead. To trust the GPS, to trust the promise of saved time. And that choice brought you here. Trust yourself to leave, and you will leave. I thought about this. About all the ways I doubted myself since that first stop. Doubted my memory, my perception, my sanity. Doubted whether I could escape, whether any of this was real, whether I was already lost. What if I don't believe I can leave? Then you won't. You'll join the others upstairs, driving those empty highways for however long it takes until you either choose to believe or choose to stop trying. Many drivers spend decades in that limbo. Some spend lifetimes. I looked at the lighthouse structure, at its pulsing light. What happens to the drivers who never leave? What happens when they finally give up completely? They become part of the structure. Their essence joins the network, becomes one of the roads, one of the signs, one of the attendants at the other locations. They transform from travelers to infrastructure. It's not death, exactly. More like a change in function. The thought terrified me. To lose myself completely, to become just another part of this impossible place, marking roads that led nowhere and guiding other drivers into the same trap. That was worse than any conventional hell I could imagine. I choose to leave, I said. Then leave. Walk back up the corridor, through the office, through the store. Get in your truck and drive away. Take the exit ramp back to the highway and continue your journey. It's that simple. But the other drivers tried to leave. They said the roads always loop back here. Because they didn't truly believe they could leave. They carried doubt with them, and that doubt manifested as roads that curved back, as familiar landmarks appearing in wrong places, as GPS coordinates that made no sense. They created their own prison through disbelief. I wanted to argue, to demand more concrete instructions, to find some trick or secret that would guarantee my escape. But I realized that was exactly what the voice meant. That need for certainty, for guaranteed outcomes, for absolute knowledge. That was the trap. That was what kept all those drivers circling endlessly through impossible highways. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me. I'm not helping you. I'm simply answering your questions. The rest is up to you. I turned and walked back toward the corridor. As I reached it, I stopped and looked back at the lighthouse structure one more time. One more question. Why a lighthouse? Why that symbol? Because lighthouses mark dangerous passages. They warn travelers of hazards, guide them away from rocks and reefs, but they also mark the boundary between land and water, between the known and the unknown. They stand at the edge of the world, looking out into vastness, and that's what this place is, a warning and a boundary, standing at the edge of everything you think you know. I climbed back up the corridor. It felt shorter this time, more manageable. When I emerged into the office, the other drivers were still sitting there, watching me. "You went down there," the old man said, "and you came back. What did you find?" "A choice," I said. "We all have a choice. We can stay here, or we can leave. But leaving requires believing we can leave, trusting ourselves more than we trust the doubt. We've tried believing, it doesn't work. Maybe you tried believing in the wrong things. Maybe you tried believing in maps or GPS or rules. Try believing in yourself instead, in your ability to navigate by instinct, to trust your own sense of direction, to know the difference between what's real and what's a reflection of your own uncertainty." I walked out of the office, back through the store. The attendant was still standing by the door, watching me leave. "Will I see you again?" I asked. "Perhaps, if you make choices that bring you here, but those will be your choices, not mine." I walked out into the parking lot. Silver was where I'd left her, solid and real among all those ghost trucks. I climbed into the cab and started the engine. It roared to life immediately, familiar and reassuring. I drove toward the exit ramp. As I did, I watched in my rearview mirror. The truck stop remained visible for a few seconds, its lights bright against the darkness. Then it faded, not abruptly, but gradually, until it was gone completely. The exit ramp rose up toward the highway. When I emerged, I was on Highway 5, exactly where I should have been. The GPS showed normal coordinates, the clock showed a reasonable time, and when I looked in my mirror, there was nothing behind me but empty road. But as I drove, doubt crept in. Was I really on Highway 5? Or was I on another impossible road that just looked like Highway 5? The mile markers appeared at regular intervals. The signs showed familiar towns. But how could I be sure they were real? I tried calling Marcus. This time, my phone had signal. It rang 3 times before he picked up. "Cole? Jesus Christ, where have you been? You've been gone for 6 days." 6 days. I looked at my watch. According to it, only a few hours had passed. But Marcus wouldn't lie about something like that. "I'm on Highway 5, heading north. I'm coming back." Thank God. We were about to file a missing persons report. The GPS tracker stopped working right after you left, and we couldn't reach you. What happened? I told him everything. The truck stop, the office, the drivers, the corridor, the lighthouse structure. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a long silence. "Cole, I need to tell you something. There was no exit 47B. We checked. We sent another driver down the same route you took, and there was no exit, no truck stop, nothing. Just empty highway." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean? I was there. I walked through that building, talked to those drivers. I believe you experienced something. But it wasn't a physical place. At least not one that exists in our reality consistently. My theory? It's like a glitch. A temporary overlap between our world and somewhere else. You stepped through it, spent time there, and then stepped back. But the place itself isn't fixed. It moves, appears, and disappears, exists only when certain conditions are met. What conditions? I don't know. Fatigue, stress, Some specific mental state? Or maybe it's random, maybe it just appears to whoever it wants to appear to. Either way, you're one of the lucky ones. You came back. Most drivers who encounter it don't. I thought about the other drivers in that office. All of them still there, still trapped, or still choosing to stay. Which was it? Were they prisoners or participants, as the lighthouse structure had suggested? Marcus, I need you to do something for me. Keep records of every driver who reports seeing exit 47B or coastal services. Track the patterns, the locations, the circumstances. Maybe we can find a way to warn people, to help them avoid it. Already doing it, and I'm sharing information with other companies too. The more we know, the better we can protect our drivers. I drove through the night, following Highway 5 north toward Tacoma. Every mile marker appeared exactly when it should. Every town matched the GPS. Every detail seemed normal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, still being tested somehow. When I finally pulled into the Western Hall Depot, it was early morning. Marcus was waiting for me, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You look terrible," I said. "You should see yourself." He handed me a mirror. I didn't recognize the face looking back at me. I'd lost weight, my eyes were sunken, and my hair had started going gray at the temples. I looked like I'd aged 10 years in 6 days. What happened to me? Time works differently there. You said it yourself. 6 days here might have been weeks or months for you, subjectively. The human body keeps track even when your conscious mind doesn't. I returned the mirror. "Is Silver okay?" "We checked her over while you were inside. Everything's fine mechanically, but there was something in the cab." He held up the coffee cup, the one with the lighthouse logo. "This was on your dashboard. Still hot, even though the engine had been off for hours." I took the cup from him, expecting to feel that same pull, that same compulsion to return to the truck stop, but I felt nothing. It was just a cup now, empty of whatever power it had held before. "Can I keep it?" He looked surprised. "Why would you want to?" "As a reminder of what I survived, of what's out there waiting for drivers who make the wrong choice." I took the cup back to my apartment. It sat on my shelf for weeks, just an ordinary cup with a logo that nobody else seemed to notice or care about. The thrumming sound was gone, the visions had stopped, and life returned to something resembling normal. But normal wasn't quite the same anymore. I couldn't drive the coastal highways without thinking about that truck stop, about those trapped drivers, about the choice I'd made to believe I could leave. And I wondered how many of them were still there, still circling through those impossible roads, still waiting for someone to tell them they could choose differently. I went back to work after a month of mandatory leave. Marcus assigned me routes that avoided Highway 101, kept me on inland highways where the risk was lower. I appreciated his caution, but part of me wanted to prove I could face those roads again without fear. 3 months after my return, I was given a run down to San Francisco. The route took me on Highway 101, right through the section where I'd first seen the sign for exit 47B. I drove it in daylight, with the Pacific visible on my right, everything bright and clear and real. I didn't see the exit, didn't see any signs for coastal services, just normal highway, normal truck stops, normal rest areas. It was as if that impossible place had never existed. But that night, when I stopped at a legitimate truck stop near Eureka, I met another driver. Older guy, maybe 60, with a haunted look in his eyes. "You've been there, haven't you?" he said. "I can tell. You've got the same look the others have." "Others?" "Drivers who've stopped at coastal services and come back. There aren't many of us, but we recognize each other. Something in the eyes, in the way we check our mirrors too often, and how we trust our instincts over our GPS now. How long ago did you go there? 15 years? Or maybe it was last week. Time gets fuzzy when you spend too long thinking about it. But I learned the same lesson you did. It's about choice, about believing in your ability to navigate without certainty, to move forward despite doubt. Do you ever see the signs anymore? He shook his head. Not in years. Once you truly leave, once you really commit to trusting yourself, it stops calling to you. The exit signs disappear, the coffee cup stays gone, the thrumming fades. You're free, unless you choose to go back. He looked at me seriously. Some do. Some drivers can't let it go, can't stop thinking about it. They drive the highways looking for that exit, trying to find their way back. And eventually they do. And that time, they don't return. I thought about the drivers in that office. The ones who'd been there for years or decades. Had they all returned voluntarily? Had they made a choice to stay? To give up on the normal world and accept that impossible space as their reality? Why would anyone choose to go back? Different reasons. Some feel like they don't belong in the normal world anymore. Like they've seen too much to ever be satisfied with ordinary life. Others are looking for someone they knew who got trapped there. And some, he paused, some are just tired. Tired of the road, tired of the loneliness, tired of the endless driving. That place offers certainty, in a strange way. You might be trapped, but at least you know where you are and what to expect. We talked for another hour, sharing stories, comparing experiences. It was comforting to meet someone who understood, who'd been through the same impossible ordeal and come out the other side. When we parted ways, he gave me his phone number. "Stay in touch," he said. "We survivors need to stick together, and if you ever start seeing those signs again, call me immediately. Don't try to handle it alone." I've kept his number in my phone ever since. I've never had to use it, but knowing it's there helps. It's been a year now since I first stopped at Coastal Services. A year since I walked through that impossible building, descended into that chamber, and chose to believe I could leave. Life has gone on. I still drive trucks, still make runs up and down the coast, still spend long hours alone on dark highways. But I'm different now. More careful about which exits I take. More aware of signs that seem slightly wrong. More willing to trust my instincts even when technology suggests otherwise. And I talk to other drivers, share my story, warn them about what's out there waiting for those who prioritize speed over caution. Some believe me, some don't. That's fine. Everyone has to make their own choices. The coffee cup still sits on my shelf. Sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I think I can hear it thrumming, pulsing with that familiar rhythm. But when I check, it's always cold and silent and empty. Just a cup, just a reminder. Or maybe it's a tether, a connection to that place that can never be fully severed. Maybe everyone who stops there carries a piece of it with them forever. A small anchor that keeps them tethered to that impossible space between here and there. I don't know. I've stopped trying to understand everything. Some mysteries don't have solutions. Some questions don't have answers. And maybe that's the real lesson. Learning to be comfortable with uncertainty. To navigate by instinct when maps fail. To trust yourself when technology lies. The lighthouse structure told me I could leave by choosing to believe I could leave. I believed, and I left. But did I really leave? Or did I just shift from one level of the trap to another? From the obvious prison of that parking lot to the subtler prison of always wondering whether I'm really free? These are the questions that haunt me in the dark hours before dawn, when I'm alone on the road, and the white lines blur together, and the mile markers seem to jump and skip. These are the thoughts that make me check my mirrors too often, that make me hesitate before taking any exit I don't recognize, that make me doubt every GPS suggestion. But I keep driving, because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. And maybe the lesson isn't about escaping the road or finding final answers. Maybe it's about learning to navigate despite uncertainty, to move forward despite doubt, to choose each mile deliberately rather than letting momentum carry you along. Last week, I got a call from Marcus. Another driver had reported seeing exit 47B, had stopped at Coastal Services, and was asking how to leave. "What should I tell them?" Marcus asked. "Tell them it's about choice, about believing in their ability to navigate without certainty. Tell them the exit is always there, but they have to choose to see it, choose to believe it exists, choose to trust themselves enough to take it." Will that work? I don't know. It worked for me. But everyone's different. Everyone's doubts are unique. Maybe they'll need to find their own way out. And if they can't... I thought about those drivers in the office, still sitting there, still waiting, still hoping. Then they'll join the others. And maybe someday, someone will figure out how to free them all. Or maybe not. Maybe they're exactly where they chose to be, where they need to be, where they'll stay until they choose differently. I drive past Highway 101 exits regularly now. Most of them are normal, numbered in sequence, leading to real towns with real people. But sometimes, just sometimes, I see one that looks slightly wrong. An exit that appears between two others without disrupting the numbering, marked with a sign that shows a lighthouse instead of a town name. I don't take those exits. I've learned my lesson. But I wonder about the drivers who do, about the choices they make, about where they end up. And I wonder if any of them ever make it back, or if the truck stop grows fuller every year, collecting drivers like specimens, preserving them in that eternal moment between arrival and departure. The coffee cup sits on my shelf, still cold, still empty, still waiting, and I keep driving, through the fog, through the rain, through the endless dark hours between cities, following the white lines, trusting my instincts, making choices deliberately rather than defaulting to whatever technology suggests. Because I learned something in that impossible place, something worth remembering. The road doesn't end until you choose to stop, and sometimes the most important choice is simply to keep moving, to keep believing in forward motion even when every sign suggests you're going in circles. I'm still on the highway, still hauling freight, still making deliveries, but I'm not the same driver who first saw that sign for exit 47B. I'm someone who chose to believe in possibility over certainty, who chose trust over doubt, who chose to leave when staying would have been easier. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all the freedom anyone ever gets, the freedom to choose, again and again, mile after mile, knowing that some roads lead nowhere, but choosing to believe yours leads somewhere nonetheless. The lighthouse on the coffee cup seems to glow sometimes, when the light hits it just right. A reminder that I was there, that I made it back, that I chose correctly. Or a warning that the choice is never final, that the road always circles back, that the last stop before the water is always waiting somewhere ahead. I don't know which it is, but I keep driving anyway.